Obviously I'm muted. Obviously I'm muted and I've been muted this whole time. Oh my fucking God. Thanks, babe. Fuck's sake. Hello, everyone. No, I don't have a close-up. I just realized I was trying to close up and it didn't work. Hi. I just fucking gave you I did a whole monologue. I said, okay, all the stuff that I said. I said, I'm sorry that didn't work out. I'm very bad at vetting things. If you want to mock me, let's go ahead and we can all get that out of our systems together. What a loser. Stream much. You know, such a professional, etc., etc. Doxy is the worst reserve frazer. And then also, now we're just going to have to do creepy Reddit stuff. Because that's what I know is safe. So we will do that for now. What happened? I got DMCA'd. I don't know. I didn't get a strike or anything, but the stream got suspended. Hi, Kyle DeYoung. How are you? Yeah, I fucked up. I did a bad job of vetting. I got it off of a list of... Yeah, I got it off of a list of royalty-free documentaries. But I guess it's not. Hello, Ellis. How are you? So now what we're going to do... is Reddit text-to-speech posts while I crochet, because it's the only thing that I know is safe. This first one is, what is an extremely dark / creepy true story most people don't know about? I'm sure it's going to be a bunch of made-up personal hogwash. No shenanigans. Sorry. Not today. I think we're just going to get back to it, if you guys are okay with that. Shannon, Shannon. Shannonymous. All right, anyway, let's keep it moving. Everybody fucking ease up, okay? Oh no. I just realized. Hell yeah, there we go.
Subscribe and like this video for more, and don't forget to click that bell button for notifications.
Yes, it was muted. And so was just Microsoft
what is an
Edge.
Extremely dark, creepy
what
true
state do you live in, if you don't mind me asking? I'm across the ocean, so don't worry. No, that's fine. I'm from Iowa, but I live in Canada now, or I'm staying in Canada indefinitely.
One was rescued by an American submarine.
Trying to become a citizen.
Don't go into all the details, but through some time and events, the Japanese ended up eating those servicemen. But that's not the weird part. The one serviceman who was rescued, that was George H.W. Bush. Google Chichijima incident for more details if you'd like.
I'm legally homeless.
There was a French doctor,
but it's the coziest homeless experience
Jewish
ever
refugees
because
to
I
help
have
them
a
to
house.
leave Europe. When they came to his house on the day of departure with their most precious belongings, he would give them a special
How has stuff
vaccine,
been?
since they were
Rough.
allegedly going to South
Things
America.
have been rough for
He
old
killed them all,
Doxter.
took their stuff, also made them pay some high fee for his help in the first place.
But that's
and
okay.
dissolved their corpses in his
We're having a
basement
good
with
time
acid.
tonight.
I'll look for proof, BRB.
Also,
there is a recording of Jim
whatever,
Jones' speech
it's
during
fine.
the night at Jonestown, where the hundreds of people drank arsenic laden juice and committed suicide. You can hear them dying in the background, and his sheer delirium is absolutely chilling. Also, the entire Jonestown incident is horrifying. There is a really good documentary about it on Netflix called Witness to Jonestown. I highly recommend. Nobody knows about this story, but
Hell
I will
yeah,
tell
Kyle.
you Reddit. This is about my uncle. I think it was the late 70s or 80s. I can't
Get that
remember
gamer
which,
bread.
but my uncle is old hess like 50 now. Anyway, he took a trip to the Grand Canyon with his friends. They were driving along the Grand Canyon and stopped near this area with hedges brush on the side of the canyon and decided to take one of your standard funny Grand Canyon pictures. They had a really funny idea. My uncle was to stand on the side of the canyon with a fishing rod and pretend to fish off the side of the canyon. So they ended up taking the picture and shortly after packed up and drove off. So they took the role to be developed, and when they saw the picture they noticed something very strange. In the picture, not far behind my uncle, was a man dressed in all black with pale white skin standing there in the brush just staring at the camera with a knowing smirk on his face. He said he and his two friends were in that spot for about 15 minutes. My uncle and his friends claimed that they did not know this man, that they were the only ones in the spot, and the Grand Canyon was vacant of tourists at this time of year. They still know nothing about the man and the picture still exists. I will post it if there is enough demand. I have to find it first. I think it's on his Facebook or something. Intercafic. It's about
Why
a
would
guy
they
who
not
sneaks
show
onto
it?
a
Why would they
farm
not
and
show
lives
it
there
after
in the
that?
attic for several days before killing them all one by one with an axe.
Yes, this is a real
It's
pic.
2
I
a.m.
haven't seen it.
This is a mistake.
Feel free to link us.
There is a guy who became famous after being convicted of murder and cannibalism and lives as a free man in Japan to this day.
I can see the picture
Thomas
of him in
Jefferson
my
started
face.
his 14-year-old slave when he was in his mid-40s. He got her pregnant 6 times.
Jesus.
The Jaime Bulger incident, 2 young English boys at 12 years old took a little
Devastating.
toddler out of the mall and to an abandoned railroad where they bludgeoned him to death with rocks. Edgar Allan Poe's The Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, 1838, was about 4 shipwreck survivors stranded in a boat before they killed an aide-de-camp boy, Richard Parker. In 1884, a boat was stranded with only 4 survivors. 3 of the men killed.
Possum
an
Gravy.
aide-de-camp boy,
Hello. Hold
also
on. I will
named
pause
Richard
it.
Parker.
I fucking love your name, by the way. Right now we're making a miniature dragon egg dice bag. It looks a lot more ruffled now than it will when it's finished. The scales will lay down flatter once I stuff it and let it sit to take a nice shape. At least I'm hoping. Anyway, welcome. Everybody make sure that you make Possum Gravy feel welcome for joining us. Thank you so much for coming and hanging out. All right, unpause it.
I have relatives, my grandfather's cousins, to be precise, who live in Ukraine, not far from the Chernobyl zone of the Lion Nation, aka place what is lethally radioactive. One day, they were at the market and found a stall selling produce. The most impressive were a large store of very large, very ripe blueberries. They bought them all up. Instead of eating the berries immediately, they decided to can them. Now, radiation is still a problem through most of Ukraine. Most families have a water purifier that will make questionable water safe to drink, though it takes a few hours. The mother got up in the middle of the following night to get a drink of water from the purifier in the kitchen when she noticed that something seemed to be reflecting light in the pantry. Curious, she investigated. It wasn't a reflection. Those jars of big, ripe blueberries were just radioactive enough to glow in the middle of the very dark night.
Nuh-uh.
Jeannie the feral child.
That's not real.
There once was an ugly barnacle. He was so ugly that everyone died. The end. This right here scared the hell out of me. Why do I always do this to myself?
Why are you doing this to
German
me?
Researchers studied racial superiority on Africans over 30 years before the Holocaust, even putting them in concentration camps run by the German military. Centralia,
I did not know
Pennsylvania.
that.
It was a pretty decent-sized coal mining town, and in the 60s, a fire, which I believe
So
was
spooky.
started at a landfill, but was not put out completely, caught an exposed coal vein on fire, and the fire burns underground to this day. In the 80s, the government started paying people to leave and buying up all of the land and destroying the houses, so no one could live there. Since they didn't exactly force people to leave, the town still has a population of about 10. There is enough coal underground to keep the fire burning for a very long time. I have been there before and in person, it is really eerie. It's a bunch of empty streets with 1 or 2 houses, a church, and some cemeteries.
I
One
want to
part
go
of the
there
highway,
so
which
bad.
was closed off and rerouted because of the fire, is all cracked and misshapen, so the road is really uneven. One of the weirdest things is the steam that comes out through the ground.
Welcome back,
It
Leslie.
almost looks
Sorry
like little hot
about
springs
before.
everywhere, but it's really all coming from the fire below. In the Indian city of Amritsar on 13 April 1919, about 15,000 to 20,000 people including women, senior citizens and children had assembled at a public garden known as Jallianwala Bagh. A brigadier general named Reginald E.H. Dyer went with 50 riflemen, blocked all exits, and ordered them to shoot at the crowd because he thought they were planning for a major opposition against the British rule in India. Pick.
Jesus.
The end result is that about 1,000 people were killed and thousands of people were wounded. Many of them died due to stampede. Some died by jumping into a well to escape the bullets.
That's so
The
sad.
story of H.H. Holmes, America's first serial killer. The guy built a murder castle and killed as many as 200 people all over the States and in Canada as well. The Devil in the White City is a really good read that juxtaposes his murdery exploits with the pomp
Hi,
and
James. How are
ceremony
you?
surrounding the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Here is a handy Wikipedia link so you can read about him in more detail than I can provide in comments. This is really going to be buried, but a man was sleeping
Escaped
on
all
a
the
Greyhound bus in
newspapers. Go on.
2008, going through Canada, when a man next to him on the bus decapitated him and began eating his flesh. Man, you can't make me go on a Greyhound now. A 10-year-old named Mary Bell slaughtered kids in her neighborhood back in the late 60s.
What?
Unit 731. Not really a
Hey,
story,
we
but
listened
creepy
about that a
nonetheless.
little bit.
Operation Falconpunch Project 905. It happened on 4chan in 2008 and is extremely creepy. I'm on from my phone right now, but if anyone could link to the Encyclopedia Dramatica article, it'd be
Why?
greatly
Why
appreciated.
is that the post that you
Well,
choose?
this
I'm
isn't
not
what
gonna
people are
fucking
looking for, but my
put
grandfather
up with this
had a
shit
pretty
for
sad
long.
life, in a way. He died in the hospital after one last heart attack. He called my mother, his daughter, in the middle of the night because he had chest pains and was taken to the hospital. He died a couple months later, right after my mother had left. We
What do you
lived and she
awful
worked
women
over an hour
want?
away,
What do you
but she made it to
awful
visit
women
nearly-
want?
32 viewers.
Just kidding. Thank you so much for the raid, Callista. How are you all? It's good to see you guys. Thank you so much for coming by and raiding us. Emperor Bolby, welcome. Ninju, welcome. Callista, you are awful. Awfully awesome. Thank you so much for the raid. Last little noob. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. My name is Zero Doxy, as you can see. I am a garbage person and I crochet while we listen to scary stories. So that's what's up. I'm embarrassed to be me. Have a seat. Welcome to my channel. I'm gonna go ahead and unpause this right now. Before anybody asks, this is a dragon's egg dice bag. Hi, Reaper. Hello, Kika. This is a dragon's egg dice bag. And this is what is an extremely dark / creepy true story most people don't know about. Reddit. Where do I buy one? I will be probably making an Etsy shop to sell the stuff that I make on stream to viewers. And I mean, I guess if anybody else stumbles upon the shop, they can. My cat is here and he's excited. I'm going to go ahead and unpause this now and get back to crocheting. But welcome, everybody. Send me that shop. Hell yeah, I definitely will. All right, Kika, you need to relax. And is everybody comfy? Are we all settled? Are we all in? Let's do this. Hi, sweet baby. My kitty's being so cute. Can you guys see him? You're being so cute. Hi, sir. I'm busy. Mommy's at work. Yeah. Okay.
every
Here
night,
we go.
wanting to be with him.
See you
Too
later,
bad
Callista.
when
Have
she
fun.
couldn't make it. After his death, we were going through his possessions, all of the things a person leaves behind. We found a box
That's
of
awful,
postcards
Ellis.
he had
I'm
sent
so
my
sorry.
grandmother during his time in the service. She was a teacher, and he never saw combat, but he always wrote to her, telling her how much he wanted to be with her. Several of the letters explained his hurt that she never wrote to him. When he returned, they were married, but she was an alcoholic for most of her adult life and never seemed very happy. He never found a way to move on after losing her. He was a pretty shut down person, and reading those words of love and picturing the life he lived with her, alcoholism, doubt about her love for him, TV, and watching his wife die of cancer after ignoring her drinking problem for a good 30 years and after her death was incredibly depressing.
That's
I saw
really
something
sad,
on
yeah.
National Geographic a while ago about the murders of albinos in Tanzania. There was one case of a family with 2 albino sisters, one of which had her arms and legs hacked off in the middle of the night for sale on the black market. The other albino laid next to her sister for the remainder of the night as she bled to death. They live in a very secluded hut with no electricity. Albino limbs are reportedly worth a lot in certain parts of Africa for use in traditional witchcraft.
That's so sad.
Nope. Not reading though these tonight. Nope. Who am I kidding? But a girl who lives 3 hours away from me, in Medicine Hat, Alberta, together with her boyfriend murdered her mother, father
Leslie,
and
that's a
3-year-old
blast
brother.
from the past.
She was released from juvie a couple years ago, and now
1,
goes
2,
to the
3,
same
4,
university
5.
as me. She was 12 years old when she did it. Once upon a time on Staten Island there was an
Hello,
institute
baby
for the
kitty.
mentally
My
disabled
cat just
known as
really
Willowbrook.
wants attention
Long
right
story
now.
short, most of the patients were left unattended. In other words, it was nightmare. Here is short glimpse of what I'm talking about. Needless
so
to say,
cute.
that SHT show was shut down, but that's only the beginning. Years later, a man by the name of Andre Rand, who was an old attendant of the facility, kidnapped 2 young girls, Holly Ann Hughes and Jennifer Schweiger.
He's
Rand
purring
was given
so
the
hard and
nickname
loud.
Flopsy
I don't know
after
if
an
you
old
guys
urban
can
myth of a
hear.
forest-dwelling axe
Oh
murderer.
my
He irked the
goodness.
body of Holly
Haley
Ann Hughes.
Marie, thank you so much for the follow. You know that feeling you get when you walk into a restaurant and it looks really busy and you're just like, I know I'm going to be waiting for a table for like at least 20 minutes and then they seat you right away? Yeah, that's the feeling that I got from you following my channel. So thank you so much for being my convenient seating. I appreciate you.
Was discovered in the surrounding woods.
Bring the
though
mic to him. I
Jennifer's body
can't.
has yet to be found.
I can't
There's
bring the mic to
actually a
him.
decent
And
documentary
it
about
would
the
be
whole thing
really,
on
really
Netflix.
mean and
Just search for
uncomfortable
Cropsy.
for him if I put
Side
him
note,
where,
the
because the
old
mic is
Willowbrook
right
facility was
here
turned into the
and
College
it
of
can't
Staten
like
Island,
go
of which I am currently
up or
attending.
down.
I hope
Sorry.
there's
And he's
8,000
like
plus
old
comments here
and
tomorrow
obese,
morning.
so it hurts him
My
to
dogs
be
just
held
started barking outside.
in a way,
It's
or
2:20
at
in the
least
morning. This
in a
thread is
way
making
that
me way more
it would be
paranoid than I
comfortable
have
for him
ever
to be
been.
pressed up against the, there is
The
no way
DiFio
for him to be
family murders.
comfortable
23-year-old
pressed up against the
Ronald
micro.
DiFio shot his parents and 4 siblings in
Microphone.
their
I
sleep
almost
before
said
later being
microwave.
declared insane after
Oh
claiming
my
that he heard
God,
voices in
Leslie,
the
that's
house.
so
The
nice of
massacre happened
you.
in Amityville, New York, and
Thank
the
you
next
so
family
much.
to live in the DiFio
Sorry,
house
Emperor
moved out
Bulby.
after a month, citing
Here,
strange paranormal
let me
disturbances.
I'll mimic it for you. He sounds like there you go.
That family's story became the basis for the novel and film The Amityville Horror, and whether or not you believe the account to be true, the DiFio murders were gruesome nonetheless.
Thank you. Oh, that was the end of that one. Okay, on to the next. Oh my goodness, anonymous gifter.
Sparkler, an anonymous user gifted a tier 1 sub to Callista_Chan.
That's so nice of you. Thank you so much. I appreciate you more than you know. Thank you. I can't even believe how supportive you guys have all been.
Wings of Harvest HD Sparkler, an anonymous user gifted a tier 1 sub to Wings of Harvest HD.
Wings of Harvest HD sounds like a game that I want to play.
Zombieophobia Sparkler, an anonymous user gifted a tier 1 sub to Zombieophobia. Rhino Dude Guy Sparkler, an anonymous user gifted a tier 1 sub to Rhino Dude Guy.
Rhino Duda guy. That was very fun. Okay, I think it's done now. Okay, we should be good. What is one specific creepy / disturbing place in the world that you would not visit? I thought that sounded very interesting. Okay.
What is one specific creepy disturbing place in the world that you wouldn't visit for any amount of money, and why?
Go take my melatonin now
North
before I
Korea.
forget. Hell yeah,
Not out of
Laird.
fear of
Get
violence
get
like
you some
robbery or assault,
comfies.
but out of fear of doing something stupid
Get those
and human
jammers on.
and being
Drink a
disappeared
glass
by
of
the
water.
government to a labor camp. Either that or Gary, Indiana. Nobody wants to go there. The one true story that scares me to death is about the guy that was in a ship that capsized and sunk to the ocean floor. He was able to find an air pocket towards the rear of the ship and was stuck there for several days. The idea of being trapped hundreds of feet under the ocean, in absolute pitch black darkness, with only a small pocket of air, while having your lower half submerged in ice cold water, is the most awful place I could imagine being. It makes my heart race just thinking about being in that situation. I couldn't imagine a worse place to be. The Scientology buildings. I was in New York once walking around the city with my sister and we passed by one.
They are
Jokingly,
so
I pretended
scary.
like I was gonna go inside and she told me pretty sternly not to. Someone came out from the doors then and just stared at me. Super freaky. Snake Island in Brazil, only 0.43 km to and home to an estimated 500.000 snakes.
500.000.
There are some places in the mountain hollers of Appalachia that you don't go to if you don't know someone or if you are not related. Even then, it's sketchy as hell if you're not immediate family. Over
Yeah?
in the Welch of West Virginia in particular has some scary spots. It's improved greatly over the last decade, as in the water is no longer flammable in most spots, as they made directly dropping waste into the river illegal. You still don't want to drink or bathe in the water, though. Don't get me wrong,
that is a
the
lot
town
of
proper
snick.
is okay.
That's
It's when you
miles
get out
of
the town
snick.
that there can be issues. Most of them, sadly, are drug-related. The suicide forest in Japan. Too sad and messed up.
Yeah, I would never go there.
Nutty Putty Cave. In fact, on any extreme cave diving, I cannot imagine
Definitely
being
would not do
hundreds of
that
meters
either.
away for being capable of stretch and move myself. Seeing NPC and others' cases just made me imagine being on one and suddenly snapping and having a panic attack. The Elephant's Foot. The
Yeah.
Lowry Mansion in New Orleans. That place has a very dark and tragic history, with such a negative
I
energy
would
emanating
go
from
to
it.
there. I would go to there
The
and
First
ghost
Nations
hunt.
residential schools of Canada, where the rape and murder of over 7,000+ First Nations children took place. For me it all boils down to two. 1. There's an abandoned torn down hospital here in the Philippines in Clark, Pampanga where, during WW2, was used to treat wounded American soldiers. Apparently you would feel uneasy once you step into this abandoned hospital and eerie ghosts linger around the area. 2. Another contender would be the Manila Film Center in the heart of Manila. During the late 80s, an accident happened wherein construction workers fell into wet cement. Imelda Marcos had the workers buried inside, still alive, because she was rushing the construction of the building.
That's not
Apparently
true.
whenever you're in the area, you can hear the eerie screams of the dead construction workers.
Somebody fact check that,
Suicide
please.
Forest in Japan. There's probably a lot of ghosts there. Bottom of the ocean's deepest point. Auschwitz. Anywhere in the open ocean. Those tiny tunnels the Viet Cong made, Kukai, I think they are
Ooh,
called.
so
Just barely
scary.
big enough to wriggle through,
So,
and they had
so
deadly
scary.
booby traps and other things. They had tiny trap doors they could pop out of and catch soldiers on the other side unawares. Dubai. Not that it's creepy
thought it
like
said
a suicide
goodbye.
forest or Snake Island, but it's literally one big monument to the worst of humanity. It's an ultra-modern, super luxe city built up in literally the middle of nowhere and surrounded by some of the worst state-sanctioned poverty. It's so outlandish and out of place and has such a discrepancy between its richest and poorest denizens that it feels like it was created for a dystopian novel and not in real life. I think it says a lot that ultra-rich playboys and
For
white
real, my
supremacist
house is
xenophobes
haunted
are
to
still
see if-
super into Dubai.
Used to see
They're
figures
supposedly
everywhere.
in Haunted
By
Island
all
in
means,
Mexico,
tell
where
us
some
all
guy
of your
found a dead
stories.
girl's body, so he hung up dolls everywhere on the island. There's more to it. The cave full of spiders. Bermuda Triangle. I don't know, man. I grew up thinking it was a pretty significant problem in the world. Even if your noble wasn't irradiated, if ghosts exist, they're definitely there. Never, for no amount of money. North Korea. I get anxiety just reading about it.
Yeah, dude.
A state
Same.
penitentiary for the second time. Staying at the Jerome Grand Hotel Jerome, Jonestown. I don't know if this really counts as someplace I would.
Work that should have been finished in 6 weeks was done in just 3 days. Jesus Christ. Also, Graceful Lily, you are just the best. You are just a sunbeam, and I am lucky to have you. And while there's no definitive yes, it occurred, there's also not any confirmation it did not occur. Listen, I had to know. I think you're amazing, and I'm going to say that loudly and proudly. That's all. I genuinely think that you are such a wonderful person. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to read this out loud because I don't know where the text-to-speech stopped, and I know that some people are only listening. Staying at the Jerome Grand Hotel, Jerome Jonestown. I don't know if this really counts as some place I wouldn't visit because I have. Me and my cousin and my sister decided to stay at one of the most haunted hotels in Arizona just for an experience, or to say that we have stayed before, considering our moms and dads were born and raised in Jerome, and my grandma was actually born in the hospital before it turned into an asylum and now a hotel. Yes, in 1962, Queen Liz and Philip visited that First Nation school, and about a dozen Native Mohawk kids vanished when they went for a picnic. And their elderly family members have an open lawsuit pinning launch, obviously, because it's the fucking queen. That's interesting. But the First Nations residential schools are I think different. They might be different than what you're thinking of, because this is where essentially white people stole native babies and tried to literally genocide their culture out of existence. It's devastating. It's worth reading about. It is so fucked up. Yeah, we'll just say that America isn't the only place that does a genocide from time to time. I mean, now they are sort of doing that themselves. Huh? Another thing about Dubai being awful is that sometimes passports of migrant workers get ripped up so they can't leave. Then they have to work for barely anything. Is there anything that we can do about that? Is there anything that we can do about that? I'm going to unpause.
Wouldn't visit because I have. Me and my cousin and my
I hate
sister
that.
decided to stay at one of the
That's
most haunted
so
hotels
upsetting.
in Arizona.
I had
just
no
for
idea.
An experience, or to say that we have stayed before, considering our moms and dads were born and raised in Jerome, and my grandma was actually born in the hospital before it turned into an asylum, and now a hotel. And for us, we are born and raised in Cottonwood,
That's
a small town
disgusting.
10 minutes away from Jerome. Where we stayed, it's called Jerome Grand Hotel. The experiences and feelings we had the night we stayed were nothing like we've ever felt or experienced before. We honestly thought when we stayed we weren't going to get any type of activity, but we were completely wrong. Throughout the whole night, so much had happened, from hearing violent tapping on the walls around us, to figures showing themselves in pictures that we had taken in the hallway and in the bathroom, mysterious demonic calls mentioning what room we were staying and where we were located. Nobody had known any of this information except us. There was so much more stuff that we experienced, but this is just the gist of it, really. The night I stayed there, I had gotten no sleep. As for my cousin and sister, they fell asleep easily, surprisingly. While being up alone, I would hear cats meowing loudly throughout the night, and while laying with my eyes closed, I heard someone fully walk through the door and close the door behind them. When I would open my eyes, nobody would be there, the door handle would jiggle, and so much more. I will never stay there again in my entire life, and I recommend nobody else should either. The energy in that hotel felt evil.
Definitely want to go
Side
to
note,
there.
by the time my cousin and sister went to bed, it was 5 a.m. We got the demonic calls at around 3 a.m. and I was too scared to sleep. But then again, I'm used to staying up very late. As for my cousin and sister, they are not, so I'm sure they were very tired. Considering how late it was, they couldn't help but just go to bed.
I bet that gets a lot of
because
people
as an
hurt and killed.
LGBT+ person, I wouldn't feel safe there. Tucker Carlson's house. I don't want to meet the dumb. North
Hilarious.
Sentinel Island.
Like,
If
I don't
went
like
there, I
Tucker
wouldn't be
Carlson
able to
either.
spend
As
the
a matter
money
of fact,
anyway.
I detest him, but what a
Mar-a-Lago,
stupid
the
Reddit
butthole
post.
of America. The Paris Catacombs. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan and Mexico. Sedumsville Rectory because of the demonic activity. Nutty Putty Cave. You know which section.
Hold on,
No.
hold on, hold on. We're writing that down. I want to write a couple of these things down, do research, and make edited content of me crocheting and talking about these things. I'm so sorry. First we have the Jerome Hotel, and then we had, what was the next one? What was that one?
Sedumsville Rectory.
This. I wonder if there's like a Ghost Adventures about that. Okay. Wow, my handwriting is a little bit rough today. All right.
Because of the
Once I rearranged my room, they stopped appearing as often. Used to have a man walk from my door around my room to stand beside my bed. I grew up in this house, so pretty much every night they would do the same, even stopping beside people staying the night and checking them first before standing by my bed for the night. He would only appear once I turned off my lights. Everyone I've had round late had seen him. That is so spooky.
demonic activity. Nutty Putty Cave. You know which section? Nope. The Appalachias. I've heard one too many stories about never being
You
out at
couldn't
night and
say
never
the
wander into the forest
Appalachians?
alone. And if you hear someone
It's really,
say your
it's
name,
the
you run.
Appalachians.
Any tight caves. I've seen the videos, and it makes me freak out. Snake Island. At the moment, Ukraine.
Yeah. Okay. That was another one. What is the freakiest, creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? I'm sure this is going to be a bunch of fake ghost stories, but let's do it. Nutty Putty Cave is such a weird name for a place. Agree.
And don't forget to click that bell button for notifications.
I wonder why it stopped once you rearranged your room. That's so fucking
What is
weird.
the freakiest, creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? I had a roommate who was always a complete a-hole. Never was polite or kind to anyone. One night after I helped his drunk ass to bed, he turned to me and said, "I really appreciate you and I know you don't like seeing me like this. You've been a good roommate and friend, thank you." I found him dead the next morning due to an undiagnosed heart condition that alcohol
Jesus.
had amplified. Not creepy or freaky in the normal sense, but I will never forget how serious and genuine he was in his last words spoken ever. It was the first time I had ever heard him compliment anyone.
That's
In
so sad.
1991, I went to a 7-Eleven by myself when we were at my grandmother's house. There was another kid there about my age, we looked similar, etc. I bought a Slurpee and walked
I
back
bet,
to my
Emperor
grandma's
Boldy.
house,
I
and
bet
that was
that's
that.
exactly it.
The
Also,
other
hi,
kid was
Sleep Ninja.
kidnapped
It's
and
so good to
murdered
see you.
pretty
How
much
are
right
you?
after leaving that 7-Eleven. The only thing I can think of that kept it from being me was maybe I won some sort of cosmic coin toss. The police are pretty sure they know who did it, but couldn't prove it, and to this day it still weirds me out. I'm 41 now, and live in that neighborhood. I was about 10 and I had a huge fear of someone being in my house, to the point where I wouldn't go to the basement, because it scared me. But I am glad I had that fear, because one day during the summer I was trying to go to sleep, and I heard a noise from above me, and I freaked out. I then noticed over the coming days that my room was really hot, and I thought this was strange, because we just got new air vents put in. My dad was checking them out, and went to get some sort of tool, when I saw the scariest image possible. There was a skinny man looking at me, and my dad from the vent in my ceiling. I froze and pretended not to notice him, and I went to get my dad, and me and my 10-year-old mind was instantly thinking run with him out of the house, but I have 2 cats, and we're scared to leave them, so I
Oh.
grabbed a paper towel and a pen, and wrote in my chicken scratch handwriting, "There is a man in my vent," but he couldn't read it, and asked what it meant, and that's when we heard a thud, and he looked at it again, and must have put it together, because he grabbed me, and called the police. When my mom got home she got to see the man being dragged out of the house in cuffs. Even though he was
That's
caught,
very
and I still
scary.
had a somewhat happy ending, the image of looking up and seeing his face, and being so petrified I couldn't move or scream still haunts me. One night I had
Okay,
a
I'm
dream
pausing and
that a
reading that.
coworker
One time when I was all alone late at night, I heard some creepy noises in the living room. Then I heard a loud scream, and I had left Hulu on and it was playing horror movies. Okay, come on. Once I set up my desk, there was only about 2.5 feet of clearance to get past. He appeared, walked up to it, and stopped, looked at me, and gradually faded away. That's so weird. I hate my brain for imagining an Among Us being in the vent. I love your brain for that. You have so many that you can't pick one. Yeah, if you think of one, by all means, we want to hear your ghost stories. We're also allowed to believe or not believe them, right? So don't get upset if somebody calls out, asks clarifying questions. Nobody's going to be mean, but we're skeptics here, you know? The creepiest thing that has ever actually happened to me was I was still a sophomore in high school, so over a decade and a half ago. I was walking home after getting off the bus. A couple minutes into the walk, a guy in a truck pulled over and asked me if I wanted a free ride. I obviously said no and continued walking, and they drove forward. However, they were going very slowly, and I could see them looking at me in the rear view for a moment before he zoomed off a good 20 miles per hour faster. Oh, I hate that. He lived to be 104 because he was told that he wasn't allowed to die until a worthy head of the family was chosen. But there never was a worthy one, so he continued to watch after death. Jeez Louise. I don't know what YTP means. I'm so sorry. I don't know what that means. Of course, I understand. Yeah. No, I still want to fucking hear him. I want to hear everything. YTP means YouTube poop? Oh, I've never even heard of that. What is that? Pardon me for a moment. Shiggity chat room. The Chinese chicken. I'm an awful content creator. I'm just very bad. Chopping and screwing videos to humorous effect on YouTube. Okay. Okay. He no longer is around. Moved on 2 years ago. Interesting. Okay, let's do this.
Killed me with an axe, and when I got
Hi,
to
Sperry.
work the next
It's
day
good to see
she
you.
was telling a fellow coworker that she had a dream that she killed me with a knife. Sort of an odd coincidence, she never did try to kill me, but it was a little bit creepy. I could hear a woman's voice singing almost inaudibly on my daughter's baby monitor. It happened a few nights in a row. I began thinking back over all the doors
Don't
that
love
opened
that
on
either,
fire
Emperor
and
Bulby.
weird noises in the house. After a week I had almost convinced myself the house was haunted.
Okay,
Then one
Sperry.
night I heard the woman's voice singing clearly for the first time. It was Taylor Swift singing Bad Blood. Turns out I just live in an old house, and my cheap Chinese baby monitor can just hardly pick up the local pop station if it's a clear night. I was alone in my house with my stepdad. I went to the bathroom. When I sat down on the toilet, that's when I saw someone was trying to open the door. I pushed it and said occupied, but whatever was at the other side kept trying to open the door. I called my stepdad, and I heard him from the kitchen saying yeah. At that point I was terrified. It suddenly stopped. I checked the whole house for anyone other than my stepdad, didn't find anybody. I went to the other bathroom, and then used it, still don't know what the hell was at the other side of the door. My cousin and I were probably targeted for a
Okay,
scam,
I'm going to pause
but
and
I
read
still
this
don't know.
long post here. As far as the scariest thing that has happened to me, it is definitely when I was also in high school, though I believe a junior this time. To put it bluntly, my entire school and school surroundings were on fire. I managed to get my father to drive me out. We drove in between two infernos left and right out of there. Next time we went back there a couple weeks later, all the trees and roofs were charcoal black. Damn, where was that? Damn. That's so scary. I'm so glad you made it out of there. Were there casualties in your town? Okay, unpausing.
How or why. We are 6 years apart, but went to the same high school at different times. Small school, graduating classes about 60. Years later, we are on a road trip together several states away and decide to stop at a huddle house for coffee. We
What
walk
is a
in,
huddle
and the
house?
guy at the next table turns around and smiles and says, "You went to Anytown High School, right?" When we say yes, he says he and his girlfriend, also at the table, smiling and not talking, went there too. We didn't recognize them, but smiled politely, commented it was a small world. He starts to rapidly talk about different things from the school, just disjointed comments that were a bit odd. He talked like a salesman, almost. At first, we smile and nod, but he had weird facts wrong. So we ask what year he graduated. He claimed not to remember. So we asked follow-up questions, and he gets cagey. Suddenly the girlfriend owes this isn't working, and they suddenly pay and leave, food untouched. We since have determined they didn't go to our school, and have tried to figure out how he knew what he did, to no avail.
That's
When
scary.
I was about 5 I was visiting my grandma in the city with
I
my
would be
mom,
creeped
dad
out
and
by
sister.
that.
We were walking towards the city center, so it was
You know what I bet
crowded.
it was? I bet one of them had like a pin or like was wearing a shirt or a hat or something that they just didn't fucking realize with their, like, they were wearing some of their high school gear. They were repping. Maybe the people watched them pull up to whatever the fuck a huddle house is and there's a bumper sticker on their car, fucking anything. And he was like trying to cold read. Maybe he was practicing cold reading. Anyway, unpause. Not scary, but I have deja vu at least 2 times a week for the past 3 years. DKR, I have deja vu more often than most people too. I do too. I have mentioned it before. I haven't like gone into great lengths about it, but it gives me really bad anxiety. It's scary to me. I hate deja vu, and it happens to me really often. Not as often as it does to you. Not as often as it does to you, but more often than most people. By a lot. And I find it scary. So it counts. It counts, bud. There was also one time when I was about 7, I'd been playing Pokemon till late. put it off, got ready to finally sleep, decided to speak out from the covers and seen my granddad, who died before I was born, was standing in my doorway. I remember he was a transparent turquoise, was wearing a button shirt and some ragged pants with no sign of legs. I remember staring terrified for about half an hour, wide awake, till he looked down dejected and faded away. I didn't sleep for like 3 more hours. Yes, DKR it's so fucking scary. I hate it. One time, there was a dead medium-sized rat that fell out from my roof behind my water bucket, but I knew it was fake and just my condition, but I'm 100% sure that was not the scariest. Oh, peek out. Sorry, my bad. Moments of deja vu are so disconcerting, throws me off for the whole day when it happens. Yeah, sleep ninja. It freaks me out. I don't like it. It gives me anxiety. Something creepy that happened to me while I was playing a game a few days ago was when I was playing the newest Pokemon. And there are alpha Pokemon that you can hear from miles away. There was an alpha in an underground ice cave that has a cry like a screaming woman, but alpha cries are also lower pitched and slowed down. Yeah, I bet that is scary. Fuck that.
I remember letting go of my dad's hand and then feeling him grab back hold of it a few moments later. I kept walking. I don't know how far.
Okay.
I hear my dad shouting from behind me and grabbing my other arm.
My eyeballs
I hear him say
misparsed
sorry,
what was
and I
going
look up,
on here
and I realize
with this
I was
crochet,
holding hands
and I was
with an old
very
man that I
confused
didn't
for a
know.
moment.
My dad assumed that I'd accidentally grabbed onto this man's hand thinking he was my dad. I remember him pulling me away all embarrassed, and I was just thinking, but the man grabbed my hand. So basically...
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Laird Wackula, thank you for the follow. You know that feeling that you get when you are popping popcorn, but you really have to pee. And so you're like, you know what? I could be faster than the popcorn. So you put on the microwave and you run upstairs and you go pee. And then you're like, fuck, this is a really long pee. I'm going to burn my popcorn. Oh no, oh no, oh no. So you finish as fast as you can and you run downstairs and you get there just in time to get the perfect popcorn. That's the feeling that I just got from you following my channel. Thank you so much for being my perfectly timed piss popcorn. Okay, unpausing.
Guy tried to snatch me out of the crowded area. I still don't understand why my dad thought I grabbed onto his hand.
I'm excited to read it,
My
Reaper.
parents were normally quite paranoid about strangers. He must have been distracted when talking to my grandma. Mom died 5 months ago, and I moved across the state into her apartment to be closer to family. I swear I heard her call my name one night. It felt so natural, hearing her voice in her own apartment, but she'd been dead over a month. I'm sure it was just a nearly asleep hallucination, but it was spooky.
I have those a
I
lot
used to
too. When I'm almost asleep, auditory hallucinations, I have them a lot. Well, not a lot, but I've had them several times throughout the years. I wouldn't say that I have them a lot. When I was a child, I'd put a tooth under my pillow and waited right outside my door for the tooth fairy to show up. After a while, I got discouraged and gave up. When I returned, the tooth had been replaced with money. I legit don't know how. That's creepy. Was it a South Park style racket? Did they go in through your window? Okay, I'm pausing.
A one-bedroom apartment with a den. In the den we had a spare bed for visitors, or whatever. One night my boyfriend was super sick, so I went and slept in the spare bed. In the middle of the night I had what seemed to be sleep paralysis, where I couldn't move, but was seemingly awake. In that state I saw a dark figure walk into
also
the
a
room
valid
and
question.
just stand over me for a while. Like the dark figure was right over my face. The next day I was very freaked out.
Are your parents one with the
I
shadows?
told my boyfriend, and he asked if I was joking. The same night he saw a dark shadowy figure in our bedroom, pacing in front of the bed. He said he slept with the light on all night, which should explain why it was on the next morning when I went into the room. This happened about a year ago, and we haven't talked about it since.
Pausing. Oh my God, DKR. I don't know if you just like are me or if we have all the same damage or what. My mom died in a drunk driving accident. And for a long time after her death, I dreamt that I was in the car and I could like see her and hear her. And like, I would like, sometimes I would be hitting her. Just like screaming at her to fucking stop, that she's gonna die. I had that dream so many times in the like years, the couple of years after she died. I'll have random auditory hallucinations that someone's calling my name. It's creepiest when it happens when I'm alone. Oh no. This is how we learn Reaper actually comes from a long line of ninja masters. Yeah. All right, unpausing.
Forget that entire night happened.
Like, I'm not sure if YouTube would
One
allow me to say
evening,
some of
for
the things I
reason,
experience, and
I
I'm a
thought
bit
about
paranoid
person that I had gone to college
if I'm
with,
going
but
to
had not
offend.
seen in more than
I'm gonna pause it. Just don't say any slurs. Just don't say any slurs, and you'll be fine. I'm certainly not going to report you. And I don't like. I mean, if you want to put a content warning beforehand, feel free. But I feel like anybody that visits my channel is not a person who needs content warnings because we talk about disturbing shit here. I was the reject that they left out of the family business. No! Well, one family's reject is another family's treasure. So you're our family's treasure, Reaper.
30 years.
Sorry,
So
we're
I
not
decided
ninjas.
to Google her name to see what she had done with her life. I found her obituary.
Or
It
at
had
least
been
I'm
posted
not.
earlier
I'll
that
speak
day.
only for myself.
If I
I'm
had
sure
Googled her
several
one
of
day
you are
earlier, I would never
ninjas.
have known that
I
she
know
had
the
died.
sleep ninja is
I
here.
was probably 9 years old, in about 1995. At that time all the schools and parents were warning us of stranger danger. It seemed like a lot of kids were getting kidnapped because they were being tricked into helping the kidnappers find a lost pet. One day I was riding my bike alone on our street, a fairly populated street, lots of kids out playing and whatnot, and a green two-door car pulled up with a woman driving and a guy in the passenger seat. The guy calls out the window to me, "Hey kid. We lost our dog, can you help us find her?" I can still remember the feeling I felt. It was like sirens were going off, and I thought for a split second that this was it, I was going to be kidnapped. A rush of what felt like burning hot adrenaline SHT through my body. I felt like I could hear everything 10x louder and see everything
Oh
10x
shit!
better.
I always
I've
do
never
that.
felt
God
anything
damn
like that
it!
before. I hopped off my bike, pulled the front tire up so I could turn around faster, and I booked it home. I was shaking and tears
We're
were
all the way
pouring down
around.
my face, even though I wasn't crying. I got home
You've been
and
certified
told
by
my mom what happened. She called the police, but I'm not sure if the people were ever caught. Crazy.
You guys are the best.
I was home alone, laying down on my living room floor and hardcore spacing out at the ceiling. I heard
feel
my
better
mother
when I'm
scream on
hanging
my
out with
front
Doxy
porch.
Chat.
I rushed out, but she wasn't there. I ran around the outside of my house. Not a single person in sight. It 10,000% sounded like my mom, and it curdled my bones because it was so raw and animalistic in its sound. I called her
Jesus.
right away. Mom picks up the phone, and I ask her if she is alright. She responds that she is, and tells me to hold on for a minute while she pulls over into the parking lot of a business. She was driving and didn't want to talk on the phone at the same time. Seconds later, I hear a lot of noise and my mom screamed. An eternity stretches on before mom is calm enough to say anything coherent. She goes on to tell me how the car in front of her and the one behind her, before she pulled over, the ones that continued on the same path of travel that she had been on, had been struck by a speeding semi that ran a red light at the next intersection. It was a terrible accident with extensive injuries. The semi clipped the rear of the front vehicle in front of the rear vehicle. My mom's car would have been hit dead center. We always joke that we are psychic, as this is not the first instance like it that we have had, but it was definitely the most freaky of the bunch.
Have a good one,
My
Emperor
girlfriend,
Bulby.
now wife,
Thanks
called
for
me one
coming in
Monday
and
night
hanging out.
and told me she had an uneasy feeling that something horrible was about to happen. She kept repeating it and couldn't really explain the feeling she had. She had never said anything like that before and hasn't since. Of course, earlier that day I had, unbeknownst to her, picked up her engagement ring and was holding it when she called me. So that didn't exactly boost my self-confidence, as you can imagine. That was September 10th, 2001. When I was 14, I had just moved to another state. My bedroom was sparse. I didn't even have a bed frame, just a mattress on the floor. Next to my bed was an alarm clock that had big large red numbers on it. I laid down on my bed, put my head on my pillow, and I looked toward my clock. The time was 10:24. I blinked, literally blinked. The clock said 10:24, but it was morning. Light was coming through the window. I swear I didn't sleep, I literally blinked, and it was 12 hours later at the exact same time. I spent the rest of the day in a tired haze, like I had stayed up all night. All I know is I had just gone to bed and blinked and now it was morning. Every time I hear those conspiracy theory shows on the radio about time skips and
Time
wormholes
skips
and
do
things,
freak me
I
out
always
so
wonder
bad. I've
if
been
that's
looking
what
for a
happened to
good
me.
time
But
skip
it is by far the freakiest thing to
situation
happen
that
to
we
me.
can watch a
3
video
times
or
in my
something
life I have
about,
awoken to see the
but
same
I'm
golden
so
grid
scared of
projected
the
on my
stuff that
wall.
I can fucking
Twice in my
watch.
youth, and once more a few years ago. It resembles a projection of light that has passed through a yellow, patterned glass. But that's not likely, because my first bedroom didn't have windows, the light didn't move, and when I placed my hand in it, the light did not project onto it. It fades after about 1 minute, and I go back to sleep. I came downstairs to tell my grandmother that Daddy is sleeping with his eyes open. He is type 1 and had been drinking. He took insulin to counter the rise in blood sugar, but wasn't paying attention and took too much. When the ambulance finally got there, we lived on the outskirts of a small town that didn't have a hospital. He was about 5 minutes away from death. If we had waited any longer,
Fucking
he would
money
have
bags
died.
over here taking
Please
too
take
much
care of your
insulin.
diabetic pals. If something doesn't seem right, it probably isn't. Know what to do in the event of a high or low sugar
Premonition
coma.
zone. Hi,
I
Pancake.
woke
It's
up
good to
at
see you.
about
How are
3 a.m.
you?
with a random Mexican woman standing by my door. I angrily stood up and asked her to leave. She did, but 3 seconds later she poked her head in and warned me that I better relock my door.
Oh
Had
my
a dream that I was going to get into a car accident. Woke up in the feeling that I was going to get into an accident. Just kinda stayed with me. Later that morning, some idiot ran a red and T-boned the car I was in. I would sleepwalk as a child. Usually I'd wake up in the living room, or I would freak myself out and wake up in the basement. On one occasion I had wandered outside. I was 7 or 8 and I woke up standing in the middle of my backyard on a super foggy morning right around sunrise. I quickly figured out which direction my house was and ran back to bed. I never told my parents about it because I figured they would be mad at me for going outside.
Just got a little
when I
busier
should have
lately.
been
Oh,
asleep.
no judge. You always,
happened
always,
literally
always
Friday
take
night.
care of you
My
before you
son
worry
is about 10 months
us over
old
here.
and absolutely hates sleep. He will sleep in his crib until about 3 to 4 a.m. then wake up
course.
screaming for a bottle, then spend the rest of the night in our bed. Friday night he woke up screaming and I got up and went to the kitchen to make him a bottle. I turned towards the night light in the kitchen so I could pour the water to the right level when I heard a woman humming in a soothing way behind
I
me.
got a piece so
It
bad,
wasn't like
dudes.
a quick thing, it was a full 10 seconds of HMMMHMMMHMMMHMMMM. My son started screaming even harder as soon as the humming stopped. I dropped the bottle and booked it to our baby's room to check him and our room to make sure it wasn't my wife. He was fine and she was dead as asleep with the door still closed like I left it.
Still could have
I had
been
to
her.
wake her
I've
up.
definitely
He has no
hummed in my
toys
sleep.
that make
I've
the humming
screamed in
sound
my
I heard.
sleep.
I
I've
still have
sang
no
in my
idea
sleep.
what it was. The freakiest part was
I
how hard he screamed
mostly
when it stopped.
whimper though.
We moved into a new place. Built around 1930 and sometime in the 70s had a fire. My 3-year-old, at the time, started running around the house and playing hide and seek with himself. Kids weren't allowed in our room, but our room was on the first floor and the closet was actually the underside of the stairs. He kept running in there and shouting, "Found you. Hide better." We didn't think much of it. New house. Kids have imaginary friends, until that night when he asked if Sam could sleep in his room. He said she
Oh
was
my
lonely,
goodness.
but
Thank
they're
you
friends
so much
now.
for the follow. That darn Batman. You know that feeling you get when you can't find your favorite keychain. You just can't find it anywhere. And you're like, well, God damn it. I guess I'll have to put a different keychain on my keys. So you go and you pick out a different keychain and you're like, okay, this one's pretty boss, but I still miss my old one. And you go to put it on your keys and it was on your keys the whole time. That's the feeling that I got from you following my channel. Thank you so much for giving me the follow and for being my extra awesome dual keychain combo. I appreciate you.
So she can sleep with him. She doesn't want to sleep in the closet anymore. No one else ever saw her, and weird things rarely happened. We moved a year later, and except for the day after
Hell
we moved,
yeah.
he asked if she can come
We're
too.
glad to
He has
have
never
ya.
spoken of her again. Someone attempted to kidnap me in a park. Thankfully I was 13 and a little smarter then. He came up to me and grabbed my wrists and kept screaming, "You're coming with me." I don't think his grip was too hard because I was able to rip away and
Oh,
I ran
wait.
super fast away. Gave a statement to the police and he
Hello?
was arrested.
I'm being a big
I
dumb
was sleeping
idiot.
on my
What a big
grandmother's
dumb
couch
idiot
and I
am.
woke up around 12:30. I snuck out to the old gravel driveway to smoke. My grandmother lived out in the woods off a dirt road. While I was smoking I saw a crescent-shaped object moving across the sky.
I can make it another
It was the
minute and a
exact
half.
size and shape as the moon that night. This was maybe early 2000. It still gives me chills. I was home alone.
Pausing. There's a few long posts here that I'm going to read really quick. I believe I already told the story of my uncle and his friend. You did tell us about that. Couple more smaller instances of ghostly fun. When I went on holidays with my family, my sister said that she would see a child standing beside my bed. And when I was about an infant, my mom tried multiple times to get the house exorcised till something made her look at the TV while ironing. There was an old movie on it with a ghost shaking a man saying, "Respect the dead boy, respect the dead." After that, she stopped. I found out about that when I was a teen, but till I was about 3 every night. That's very scary. Without fail, I'd have a nightmare until one night I had an incredibly vivid dream where I was swimming with dolphins. And when I went into the water, I found I could breathe in the water. After that, I stopped having nightmares. That is... what a weird marker for you're not going to suffer this anymore. Glad they didn't tell you till later. That would have scarred me for life. Legit, though. Unpausing?
Alone sleeping, when all of a sudden I felt a presence crawling up onto my bed. I can hear the sheets ruffling and feel the bed sinking. All while I hear a soft laughter getting louder and more intense as it gets closer to me. Finally, after what felt like it was literally next to my ear, I wake up. As I turned my head to look to see what the hell was laughing at me, I see this nondescript figure hovering over me and burst out in what I could only describe as the most aggressive laughter, all while shaking my bed violently. My head felt like it was being rattled from all the shaking. At that moment I wanted to scream as loudly as I could, but I could not summon the strength to, so much as turn my head away from what I was seeing. I was terrified and angry. Angry at myself for being absolutely terrified and not being able to even attempt to defend myself from this creature that had spent what felt like minutes taunting me. When I was finally able to muster the strength to fight back, it had already disappeared from the room with its laughs echoing. Turns out I have schizophrenia, and this was the first of many hallucinations that plagued me throughout my late teens to my mid-20s. With therapy and the early realization that it might be mental illness, I was able to keep myself relatively sane. That was almost over 15 years ago. It's gotten better, and these days it doesn't happen as often, but when it does, usually whenever I get severely stressed in a short period of time, or moderately stressed over a prolonged period of time.
Man, okay, we're gonna run a quick commercial break so that I can go hang a piss real fast. Everybody hang tight, be groovy. We'll be right back. Hi, I'm back. I'm so sorry. I was trying to think of a good lie to tell you guys for why it took me so long to get back, but I'm just going to tell you the truth. I really needed a hug from Josiah. I just really needed a nice long hug. So that's what I did. I went and I got a hug really quick. Anyway, this one is, we already watched this one. This one is, what is the scariest, most bone-chilling moment you have ever witnessed in your life? There she blows. Congratulations on what?
Bone-chilling moment you have ever witnessed or have been told in your life. Was on the jury for a trial where a 70-year drunk driver hit and killed a motorcyclist after making an illegal turn. Police testified against him. All the evidence was against him. It was pretty cut and dry. Go into deliberations after both parties rested, and one woman refuses to convict him on most serious charge because he's old. She concedes on other charges and refuses to switch because she's doing us all a favor by convicting on lesser charges. We sit there for hours trying to convince her, then a fellow male juror switches to the other side because he wants to go home. Someone else gets hungry, so they give up as well. Other people switch, jury can't come to a decision, and can't convict him on the major crime. I won't forget seeing the wife of the motorcyclist cry, his parents in disbelief and start to cry, his young daughter just sitting there quietly. I work in mental health, particularly with
very
people who
sad
have
on
extensive
all
suicidal
fronts.
ideation and multiple
Damn.
psychiatric hospitalizations.
Hugs, man, them dope.
Despite
Hell yeah.
working with this population for close
Such a
to
dull
10
voice.
years,
This is a
I have
text
only
to
had
speech,
one
right,
client
Kudo?
successfully commit suicide. They poured gasoline over themselves and set themselves on fire. There are no words for how extremely terrifying that is to see. The worst part was they didn't immediately die. I will hear them say that wasn't what I wanted for the rest of my life. Pro way you stinkus people figure out who I am. When I was about 12, my sibling broke down and told my mother that they had been touched by our grandfather. This was late at night, and me, my siblings and my mom pretty much cried in a pile all night. It was one of the worst nights of my life. The next day we stay home from school, but my mom still needed to go to work, no dad. We lived in an apartment that was semi-underground, and the windows on one side of the house were pretty much on the ground outside. We hear a knock and my grandpa's voice asking us to let him. We were terrified and we ran to close all the blinds and lock the back door. He was an exceptional manipulator, and he put on his sweetest, saddest grandpa voice and starts knocking on all the windows, pleading with us to let him in. None of us are saying anything and we're hiding. We call our mom and whisper that grandpa's here and he's trying to get inside the house. He tries opening the door, and when it was locked he started to get really angry.
Everyone needs to give dogs a hug. I would love a bunch of hugs.
And
That would make
just
me so
loves us,
happy.
And nothing is wrong. He left after about 10 minutes, but it felt like hours.
If you guys
My
could
mom
just
rushed home
line
as fast
up.
as she possibly could. I forget if it was the same, next day or a while later, but his and my grandma's house was searched by cops. They found he had set up a tube to go from a closet in his study. He would never let anyone else go in his study to the bathroom, and he'd been watching us go to the bathroom and shower for I don't know how long. Good news is he did go to prison. A whole 3 years. We have to see him at family gatherings, like funerals, and it makes my skin crawl. I've been mugged at gunpoint and almost kidnapped in Mexico by a gang of murderers fleeing America, 13 then, and my formerly sweet old grandpa, trying to get at us kids for God knows why is the most terrified I've ever been in my life.
I wonder if
Victim
he
of a
was going to
severe
kill
road
them.
rage incident. I am a small 26-year-old woman in a Mazda 3. At roughly 7 a.m. in the winter on Mountain County back roads,
Hi,
a
RJ.
giant
It's
Ford
good to see you. How
350
are you?
decides I'm going to slow. He starts accelerating.
No, we
first
dogpile
like
them
he's
hugs.
going to
Ooh, that
ram
sounds
me,
great,
then at the last
too.
moment passes me illegally on a turn. He gets in front of
Same,
me
Batman.
and then slams on
Agree.
his brakes. I slam on mine and narrowly miss hitting him. We are sitting there for a minute when he starts revving his engine. He goes into reverse and tries hitting my car. I'm screaming and go into reverse. We are now both driving down the mountain in reverse. I use my Bluetooth to call 911. They can't make anything out I'm saying.
We're going to
because I'm
Walmart?
screaming.
Oh, shit.
After
I need some
about 100
WCP
yards of
anyway.
driving backwards, he stops. I stop. I start talking to the 911 operator. The man gets out of his car with a weapon and starts running towards me. I scream again. In the distance a car is coming and the man runs back into his truck and flees. I have never
Sorry,
in my
that's
life
white
been
cheddar
so scared.
popcorn for the
Never have I ever
uninitiated.
thought I was about to be
Uninitiated.
murdered. It is not a feeling you can forget, but it's hard to explain. I was crying and shaking uncontrollably for the next 6 hours. I do not drive that road anymore. Seeing my sister at her worst when she was anorexic, it looked like all her bones, including her skull, were about to pop out of her skin. Scariest moment, nodding off behind the wheel. Just
Oh,
finished working 14
no.
hours. The only thing that saved me was the car who laid on their horn as I cut them off saved me from running straight into a barricade. Creepiest moment, watching my parents take their last breaths, death rattle wheeze, in the hospital after fighting small cell lung cancer, stage 4. This happened 5 years apart, BTW. I have nightmares and chills because I can still imagine it.
That's so sad.
Creepiest moment.
Ugh.
Patrolling an empty warehouse and my radio goes
Playing
off and it's like a
Cyberpunk,
sort of
fun.
demonic gibberish, and the lights shut off.
Are you having a good time?
And I remember
haven't
thinking,
checked it out
OFCK,
since
no, I ain't being in a horror
a
movie
long
tonight.
time.
Beelined it for the door. Wolf
Since
had
it was,
to leave
like,
anyways to
very
use my
new.
phone to call in the power outage. Later figured it was probably an electrical issue of some sort, causing radio interference and a power outage. Worked alone during those hours, so not a prank from someone else. Story of my grandfather. I guess he used to drink a lot. Like, way too much. One night he hit the bar on the way home from work and then drove home after it closed. The next morning he goes to his car and there's a mangled tricycle somehow wedged in his grill and bumper. I guess my grandparents called the police and hospitals to see if he hit a kid. No reports and no blood on the car. Luckily, he hadn't hit anyone, just the tricycle.
That's
He never
so
drank
scary.
again. School shooting at my high school.
They
I was
patched a
fine,
bunch good
but when the
shit.
police evacuated us out of the school, they kinda walked us right through the area where it started. There was a lot of blood pretty much everywhere. They hadn't moved one of the bodies out either and had covered him up with a blanket, but we knew. Man, that shit sucked. That image of the school sticks with me and it's been almost 20 years now.
I
Was
can't
volunteering at a race
I can't
and was in the
imagine
middle of
what it
handing
feels
cups
like
of
to be
Gatorade
in a
to
school
thousands
shooting.
of exhausted runners who have just finished and are all shuffling past me. I'm facing them to give
That's
them
so
the little
fucking
cups, so I'm
scary.
looking back down the race course at the finish line about 50 feet from me. Massive boom suddenly and I see this huge poof of smoke. Everybody jumps, it was loud, everybody turns and looks. All the hundreds of faces that a second ago had been facing me are all now swiveled the other way. The puff of smoke goes rolling up the side of a church. Very eerie second of silence as everyone's watching the puff of smoke, and there's this weird distant high-pitched sound. Everyone's thinking, could that possibly have been? Then suddenly boom, second one, bomb. And then the weird distant sound resolves into a wave of distant screams, like blood-curdling, desperate screams. The screams take this couple seconds to sort of at peak volume, like, they sort of ramp up, and there is this tone to those screams, this pitch and raggedness of sheer terror, that like trips some seriously weird alarm bells in my head, and every
I
single
think we're
one
only
of
gonna
those
do
thousands
one
of
more
exhausted
layer
runners who had
of
all been barely able
scales,
to walk seconds before,
and
just
then
all
do
launched
our
forward, almost
topper.
levitating, and go sprinting past me.
We'll see how
The
it
look of that
looks, if
entire
it's
crowd
like,
just
if it's
launching
tall
into
enough.
motion in synchrony, all
If
the
it's not,
hundreds
then
of
we'll keep
faces whipping
going,
toward me
but
again,
we're
and
getting
every
pretty
single
close to the
person
end of this
pushing off
project,
into
it
the
feels
sprint.
like,
I
to
will never
me,
forget that.
anyway.
The volunteers around me
I
run
could
too.
be
Everybody
mistaken,
runs,
though. We
except
might
me
need
and
to do
another
double what we
volunteer,
have here
except
for
the
it to look
cops.
right.
These cops who had been standing nearby chit-chatting are like instinctively instantly running toward the booms. I have never seen a huge crowd flee in panic before, let alone a crowd that had been so exhausted before.
You
And
all
I have
have
never
to-
seen
Hey,
cops in a
J-Rod,
moment
good
of
to
crisis
see
run
you.
toward danger before. A second later a wheelchair comes bolting toward us, this cluster of people around it, and this white-faced volunteer pushing it, and there's a guy in it who I think is sitting with his legs folded under him, and he's holding these two red sticks out in front of him for some reason. He goes all the way past me before I realize the two red sticks are his tibias. He is not sitting with his legs folded under him, his legs have been blasted off. He was
Oh
the
my
first of
God.
26 people legs blasted off, and then hundreds of others with chunks of flesh gouged out, eyes missing, etc. This was 4 years ago in Boston. This happened a month
I bet
ago
that was
when I
so
picked up my sister
fucking
from the party.
scary.
I was driving home and along the way I see this black car doing 15 miles per hour, flashing brake lights, turning on the left indicator signal, but making a right. Impatient, I decides to illegally cut him off and just go home. But after I did it, he begins to speed up and flash his fog lights, signaling me to pull over. I just kept driving out, being crept out. My house was a couple of miles away with a lot of turns, but this guy kept tailgating me and pursuing me, which was getting pretty scary. I literally drive 50 miles in the radius of maybe 10 miles trying to get him off me. I finally made a left turn where he couldn't follow.
Yeah,
or
I
risk
can't
hitting another
imagine
car.
that fear,
I quickly pulled over
Leslie.
and turned off all my lights.
School is
only
supposed
to see
to
the
be
car
safe,
slowly drive by
you
as
know?
I hold my breath, hoping he doesn't spot me. After about 15
School
minutes,
should
I
be
look
safer
around
than
and
your
slowly
house,
drive home. My sister was drunk and asleep, so she basically didn't even
School
know
should
what
be
happened.
the safest place that
This
a
is a bit
child
different,
goes.
the most scared I have ever been, and probably the closest I have been to death. I was by myself, riding a motorcycle in a spirited fashion, on a remote forested mountain road that is famous among motorcycle riders. I came around a blind, but high-speed, corner at about 70 miles per hour. Suddenly, I found myself confronted with a herd of about 20 elk crossing in front of me. I literally couldn't see the road on the other side of the herd. I'm talking a solid wall of 600 plus pounds animals that are over 6 feet tall. I had enough time to close my eyes, and that's about it. At that speed it would take over 200 feet to stop, and I had about 20 feet and no clear line through. Somehow, and I will never know for sure how, I got through totally unscathed. I remember hearing their hooves on the pavement. I pulled over and looked back to see the last of them running into the woods. I turned off my bike, got off, and sat on the side of the road for about 30 minutes until I mostly stopped shaking. Then I rode home very slowly. I haven't ridden that road since, or without a helmet camera. For the abusive a-hole that he was, my dad did go through some shit. Not sure how the conversation came about, but my mom ended up telling me this story. Back
No,
in
Doxy, home should be the
1992, a
safest
lot of
place for a
people
child.
didn't give a
Home should be the
FCK about
safest place for
seatbelt
a
safety
child to be
and even actively
themselves,
rallied
sure.
against it.
But like,
Well, one young mother learned the
no,
hard
I
way
think
while
that
wearing seatbelts
we can talk about this for a second. I definitely think that schools should strive to be safer than home for a child. Teachers are mandatory reporters for a reason. You should be able to take risks at home that you wouldn't be able to take at school, et cetera, et cetera. There's a bunch of reasons that schools should 1,000,000% strive to be safer than the child's home. You know what I mean? Doxy, how dare you make sense? I don't think that it's like a big. I don't think that it like has to be like that big of a discussion, but like 100%, like each teacher should be like, okay, all of my kids that I teach are fucking safe when I am here. You know what I mean? And I don't know. We don't have to talk about partisan stuff because I know that never goes well. But the fact that a gun can make its way into a child's hand is fucking sickening. Like, it is sickening that a device that is its sole existence is to commit the most damage possible as fast as possible can make its way into the hands of a child. Oof. See you later, Anna. Have a good one. The Catch-22 is making it into a giant prison. Schools should be a little bit like a prison, dude. I'm sorry. Like, you are there to learn and you will survive the day, hopefully. Unless you're in an American school, I guess. Unpausing.
Is important. My dad drives a semi-truck as a cross-country deliveryman. He was cruising down the highway when all of a sudden this car randomly swerves out of
That's
its
really
lane
sad.
into a head-on collision with my dad's truck. If you've ever seen the aftermath of a car on semi-collision, you know how this is going to turn out. Miraculously, the mother lived. Her mother, the little girl's grandma, died, perhaps from impact or maybe had a heart attack. But the worst part was that the mother wasn't considerate enough to buckle up her 5-year-old daughter in the back of the car, and upon impact the little girl went flying through the windshield and didn't hit the ground for a solid 10 feet. She was dead on impact. And now that woman has to live for the rest of her life, knowing that one simple inaction is the reason her daughter is dead.
That's really sad.
Wear your seatbelt, please. When I was around 8, I got on a rollercoaster at Six Flags in Houston. It had those foam-covered bars that locked over your shoulders and a small seat to sit on, but the feet dangled. About a minute into the ride, it starts twisting. I slip halfway out of the seat and almost out of the seatbelt that was supposed to be checked for security beforehand, but wasn't tight enough.
That is scary as hell.
I spent the entire ride digging my little nails into the foam padding on the shoulder bars, while the edge of the seat was digging into my back. My mom was sitting next to me and noticed what was happening. All she could reach was my shirt and held onto that for the ride.
Thrill rides.
I haven't been on a coaster
I love
since.
them.
Was goofing around.
But I am always so scared of that shit. Those bars are almost always too loose for me. And also, I'm very scared that my hair will fly up and get caught in the machinery because my hair is literally like 4 feet long. Like, it's so long. My hair is so long. Like, Yeah. It just... Thank you. I like it too. It's all I can think about sometimes when I'm on rides, and it just makes me scared the whole time. And like, no matter how tight of a bun I wrap that shit in, like, man, I'm just terrified that it'll get jostled loose and fuck my shit up and we end up with no head today. You know what I mean?
Climbing some boulders on the top of a gorge with friends, and I slipped. I remember rolling and coming finally to a stop about 40 feet from the edge. Still freaks me out. Sometimes I dream about it. It also
okay,
freaks me out
Rapunzel, I
thinking
see
about
you.
my
Yeah,
friends
straight up.
And if I had gone over.
I would be worried to catch it.
Both my
Yeah,
mother
that's what
and
I'm thinking
grandmother
about.
worked in the
That hair
medical
needs
field.
to be free.
My
Yeah.
grandmother told my mother this story when she was a teenager. My grandmother was an X-ray tech, and they would often bring in inmates for emergencies, and my grandmother had to
Most
scan
people
a
I
man
know
in
say they
full
wouldn't go to
distress.
America in
He
case
was a
they get
violent
shot.
inmate
Please
known
fucking
for biting.
speak to
He
our
was wielded and wearing a
Republicans.
face guard,
Please
Hannibal
speak
Lecter
to our
style, and
conservatives.
wouldn't
Please speak to the
only
people
try to thrash
who
around
claim
against the
that they are
restraints. The party leader, when he
libertarians,
noticed
but
there was a
really
woman
they
in
are
the
just
room,
gun
my
nuts.
grandmother,
You know
he
what
made eye
you know what I'm
contact,
getting
bared
at.
his teeth, mask
Speak to
stops
them.
the jaw from moving, and would only say be
All of you, tell them how fucking stupid they are.
So now that phrase really bothers my mom, and is a good way to send chills down my family's spines. Watching as a nice nurse tried more and more desperately, and in vain, to find my unborn son's heartbeat at 32 weeks. Scariest moment. I was about 16 or so and on my way to help decorate for a school dance. A buddy and me decide to go get some snacks and drinks for everyone, and he's driving his hatchback Camaro, 90s model. About halfway down the road,
Half of
while
these are
heading back with the
fucking
snacks, we
car-
are coming around a
car
fairly sharp right
crashes.
curve, and halfway through the curve a truck comes blasting toward us half on our side of the road. My friend swerves and overcorrects a few times until we are heading semi-straight on the road, not realizing we are still sliding a bit toward the ditch. He tries to save it, and we hit the ditch on the driver's side, still moving fairly quickly. The last thing I remember before blacking out was us in mid-air careening into the ditch. The car was mangled and upside down, facing the opposite direction we were heading, and both of us are hanging upside down in out seats.
That's
He's
almost
still
exactly
unconscious
how
and his head
my
is tilted sideways against the roof.
car flip
I
went.
had to crawl through the broken window on the back hatch because the doors were crushed. There was a man standing across the road who just happened to live right across from where we crashed. He said we hit the ditch, flipped, and the top of the car was crushed on a tree before rolling back down into the ditch upside down. I had a mild
Hi,
concussion
Lita, how
and
are
he cracked
you?
a bone in his neck but wasn't paralyzed. We were lucky as hell. I still get nervous when riding as a passenger. Most bone chilling. The day I had to use all the training in CPR I never imagined I'd ever need. Working at a grocery store, I heard a woman screaming about something in one of the aisles.
I can't
Another
fight
woman
hand to
comes
hand, and I
running toward
still
the front, panicked and asking if
won't
anyone
have a
knew
gun
CPR,
because of
as
my
some guy collapsed and wasn't breathing.
my
I closed
political
my lane
beliefs.
with
It would
people
be
still in the line and met a
hypocritical of
pharmacist who
me
works
to get
there
a
halfway
gun.
to the guy. The two of us were the only ones who were trained in CPR, and we worked
Thank
for
you,
about 30
Lita.
minutes,
Yeah,
switching out every
I
few
like
minutes
it.
when one of us got
I like
exhausted.
it.
A
It's
lady
much
came
better
back
than
a
the
few
purple
days
one so
later to the shop
far.
and told us she was a relative of his and that
I
he
like it
didn't
a
make
lot better
But
small.
thanked us for trying so hard to keep him alive until the paramedics got there. I still remember it like it's fresh in my mind.
Oh, that's the end of that one. Okay. Hello? Okay, and then this last one is going to last us for definitely the rest of the stream because there's only like an hour left. But it's 2 hours of 911 operators, and we'll just cut it off in between stories at some point, and we'll pick it back up there tomorrow, and I will try to find something other than Reddit that we can do tomorrow. I'm so sorry that this is what it came to tonight. Hello? Oh, no.
While the victims 911
sorry.
operators of Reddit. What's the most disturbing or scary call you ever received? Throwaway, as my place really doesn't like us talking about work outside of work. Had a call for a brother who killed his other brother with a hammer. The pig part, while the victim's little daughter was watching. The daughter called us from another room and told us her daddy's I fell out. Perp was apprehended. Daughter taken by relative. Had to smoke after that one. And I don't even smoke. 1979 NYC.
Ugh.
Got a call from a crying child. A little boy saying his mom and dad were fighting and his dad
Really,
said
that
he was
list
going to
was
throw
just
the mom out the
wrong.
window. I could hear a terrible
But also,
fight
I
going
do
on in the
like
background.
blaming
Woman
YouTube for
screaming,
things.
"Things breaking,
So yeah, I'm on
man yelling,"
Raikudo's side.
etc. The poor kid didn't know his address. We didn't have the technology for call ID and would have to use reverse telephone books. A trace would take forever. Anyway, while I'm trying to get the address, I hear a horrific scream and glass breaking. A few seconds later, the other operators in the room are getting calls about a woman lying in the courtyard who came out of a window. Very sad. Worst of all is that I am sure someone else in this apartment building must have heard this fight, but no one called for help until it was too late. Poor kid. Working 911 in NYC during the 70s/80s was a nightmare. The city had a very high crime rate and shit technology. The toughest ones for me involve kids. Anytime a parent finds their child dead is especially tough. The single worst call I've ever taken though was a woman who was calling in that she was hearing weird noises in her house. While walking through her house, she started screaming and told me there was someone in her house. There were a couple soft pops followed by a gargling sound. After the officers had cleared the house and found her, it finally came out during the investigation that her adult son had killed her while high and freaking out. Gunshots don't sound like you'd think on the phone. They're rather soft. It's an eerie sound. Something so violent being so soft that if you aren't paying attention you can miss it. In true Reddit style. I'm not quite the intended target of this question.
That is very scary.
I
don't know why that freaks me out so bad, but it really does. See you later, Leslie. Have a nice night.
The most was a man who was paralyzed from the waist down and
make it louder. Sure.
Tell us that he was midway through attempting to amputate his own legs at the thigh using nothing but a hacksaw and a Stanley knife. He'd laid newspaper down on the floor and everything, in an attempt not to get blood on the carpet. Naturally, not long into the call, he passed out due to blood loss. Grim stuff. Wow, there's a lot of love for us lately. In another thread in an AMA that I did,
God damn
I
it.
told my story of having to stay on
How's
the
that?
phone
Is that
with
better?
a young man for about 40 minutes, maybe a little more, who had a very disturbed man break into his home, and with a loaded shotgun pointed at his face the entire time, demand that he call the police. He wanted a suicide by cop. I now realize
That's
that
true,
I didn't
Reaper.
get overly detailed about it in my other mentionings of it, but this young man urinated himself, almost threw up, and was begging me to keep him alive. I haven't dreamt about it in a long time. It was several years
It's not
ago,
better?
but it stuck
Oh
with me.
no.
Another NYC received an anonymous call that a patrol car, RMP, was parked in the middle of a street in Harlem with the doors open and no police officer in sight. We used to
Okay, I
get
think
tons of prank calls,
that's
but
like the
after a
best
while,
I
your
can
gut tells you when
do.
they're
I'm
real.
so
They
sorry.
found the officer several blocks away. He had been shot and then dragged by the perp's car for several blocks. Terrible. It's kinda strange, but stuff that sounds the most dramatic. People getting severely beaten during a call, or being shot at, admitting to a murder they committed in the last 30 seconds, or even people killing themselves while they are on the phone to me. That doesn't bother me too much, but give me a distressed elderly person and I get a lump in my throat. Combine that with any one of the above and it turns into a bit of a shit shift. We've all got our triggers and sometimes the least spectacular stuff can be the hardest to deal with. Story 1. I once answered a call. Two brothers were arguing over drinks and one of their girlfriends or wives was over. Anyways, the brothers are drinking heavily and one pulls out a gun and shoots the other one. When I received the call, I can barely get the guy's address over him screaming to send the paramedics. He keeps shouting, "Where the F are they?" While I am trying to stay calm and give CPR instructions and tell him to tell the female there to stop
agree,
the bleeding,
Reaper,
firm
but
pressure on the
none
wound.
of them will
Furthermore,
listen.
medical
Nobody
cannot go
will
on
listen
scene
to
until
you.
police have secured the firearm. Listening to the pain in someone's voice while they are screaming for help kind of haunts you. Both of them had to be around 30 years old. I couldn't imagine killing a family member. Dr. Two brothers are drinking. One shoots the other. The brother who was shot was already dead when the call was made. Edit. I know I hopped on the train late, but I have a few more if anyone wants them. Edit 2. Sorry, I was actually studying for finals. But here are some more. Story 2. So the next one I got, it was later at night, probably around 11:30 p.m. A female calls me screaming.
guys see,
She was
okay.
yelling and burning. So I told her to stop, drop, and roll. And once the flames were out, I told her to turn on the hose and put cool water on it until the paramedic got there. Once she was a little calmer, I was able to learn more about what happened. So she had been drinking with her boyfriend and he got depressed and decided tonight was the night he was going to commit suicide and kill his girlfriend. So in his intoxicated state, he found a gas can and started dumping it on himself and his girlfriend, and lit them both on fire. They also managed to catch the house/fence/yard on fire. Both of them survived. He got the worst of the burns. The house and fence had minimal damage. TL. Dr. Guy tries to kill himself and his girlfriend with fire. Ouch. Story 3. This one was probably the hardest call I've ever taken. The phone rings and there is a little girl 8 to 10 years old. She is scream/crying, "Daddy is dead." I can't calm her down at all. She keeps crying on the line. And in the background I can also hear 2 other small girls crying. I was watching our call logs and more calls are coming in. The same are for gunshots fired. What had happened is 3 guys had decided to break into a house and thought it was empty. So they rang the doorbell to make sure. The dad startled them and they shot him. So the mother runs out to see what happened and she got shot as well. The guys took off, leaving the 3 girls aged 8 to 12 to call 911. We are not allowed to disconnect a phone until police or EMS are on scene. So my heart was breaking for a small family that had lost both parents in one sad accident.
We're
I
gonna need
listened to the
this
girl
real
for
quick.
6 minutes and 37 seconds before police arrived on scene. The good news is that the mother lived. TL, DR 3 to 3 guys are going to break into a house. Dad startles them and gets shot. Mom gets shot, leaving an 8-year-old girl to call 911. My father was a 911 call taker. The worst calls he got were suicide calls where pretty much all he heard was someone immediately saying hello. My name is John Doe and I live at 123 App Street and I'm going to kill myself. Bang, how terrible. Got a call a few years ago.
Yeah,
Lady's house was on
that
fire,
sounds awful.
and her daughter was stuck in a back room. The flames were too much and too high, and she couldn't get through them to get to the girl.
So I got to sit on the phone and listen to A little girl burn to death, and B, the mom scream and cry as she watched.
That
It
is
was 5 years ago and the sound still haunts me.
terrible.
Edit, I thought of a second one. Had a guy who called in reporting his son was unconscious and not breathing. He was as calm as could be about it. 2. Said
I
he
thought
left
about
the room
being
for
a
just
911
second, and when
operator
he
because
came
I
back,
feel
he
like
found
I'm
him this
good at
way. But he
remaining
wasn't
calm
panicked, wasn't worried. Just talking
in
like he was
fucked up
telling me about his day.
situations.
Kept trying to get him to start CPR.
But man, I
and
don't
he
know if
treated
I'd
it
be
like a
able to
chore.
do
Turns
it.
out, the kid started crying and the dad got frustrated and beat him to death. Kid was 2. I was a 911 call taker / dispatcher in Portland, Oregon, received a call from a strung out girl.
awful.
Story was she said her boyfriend had been doing meth for 3 days and owned a lab. She was screaming that he had wiggly purple worms in his arms and there was blood everywhere. Turned out that they
It was
were his
his
veins.
veins. Oh,
he was
no!
literally out of his gourd on crystal meth and tearing at his flesh and ripping out his veins. I did not want to live my life on their night shift taking calls like that, so it wasn't looked before I switched professions. My sister got a call from
I was
a
the
woman
IT
whose
guy
son
for a
was out
small
in the
PD
yard
when
playing
I
football.
was in
He threw
high
the ball
school, got
over a
shot at
fence
twice.
and jumped
Fuck
over
that,
the fence to
J-Rod.
retrieve it. Everything
Also,
went normal
that
there,
officially
but
makes
when
you
he
a
landed in the
superhero.
neighbor's yard, the
He
guy was on his
survived
back porch
gunshots.
balls deep in a pig. When the cops came, he said he
There
did
goes
it
our
because his
Popeye
wife is a crack
spinaching
whore and he doesn't want to get AIDS. Very, but someone might make it down there. Not a dispatcher and would never want to do it for a
You
living
know,
as I
I
work
could be
very
worse
closely
than
with
Popeye. I'll
dispatchers.
take
I have been the
Popeye.
IT guy for a law enforcement agency going on 7
You can
years.
get a gun for
Now
sport
only
hunting or
part-time
pest
with them as I
extermination
needed
in
a
rural
change.
areas,
Our
but it's
current
limited based off
911
the use, and
supervisor
you
pulls
need to pass
calls off
numerous
our
tests to be allowed to
911
handle a
recorder,
gun
but some of the
legally.
previous
We put the
supervisors would
restrictions
not
in
do
place
it.
in the
This, of
70s
course,
after our
means
first
that I
and
had to pull
only school
911
shooting. Yeah,
calls whenever
that's
there was
what
a big
smart
incident or a
fucking
legal
countries
request
do.
came in. I would listen to the
They
calls,
don't
as
like
you
it
should
when
do,
kids
to
get
make sure that we
shot.
got all the correct radio traffic when requested, and of course all of the call. The one that sticks out to me
So they
happened
like
around 3
take
years ago.
measures
I was
to make sure
actually
it doesn't
repairing some
happen
equipment
anymore,
in our
you
dispatch
know?
center when
That's
the
what
call
smart
came in and had
countries
to
do.
immediately pull the recordings as we all
What
knew it
good
would have been
countries that
requested.
care about
I
their
listened to it all
citizens.
happen and did my best to assist.
The most
An
vulnerable
18-year-old
of
called
their
in
citizens
hysterics
at
and asked
that.
for an ambulance because his mom was shot. We of course dispatched immediately, but they were in the middle of nowhere and the closest ambulance was 30+ minutes away. As the call continued, we got him to tell us what happened. He had pulled out his hunting rifle to clean it before going hunting the next day. It was an older style bolt-action rifle with no safety and an extremely light trigger pull. He had just pulled it out of the case and accidentally hit the bolt on the side of the table, which caused the gun to fire. The bullet hit the mom in the stomach while standing less than 30 feet away. The father and son were both attempting to stop the bleeding and the son immediately called 911. At first you could faintly hear the mom in the background
Yeah, I'm
saying
with
it's
you,
okay.
Lita.
You didn't mean it, babe.
See you later, Kyle.
It's
Have a nice
okay.
night.
I love you both. She just repeated this over and over. The father was praying quietly, and the son was sobbing and giving us all the info as we tried to assist. The sounds of that call will always haunt me. The son just shouted over and over near the end, "Mama. God. Mama. I'm so sorry, Mama. Don't die, Mama. Mama. Please." The mom made it nowhere close to the ambulance arrival. The dispatchers were cool and collected and worked like an amazingly well-oiled machine during the whole call. When the call was over, we all just sat there in silence. Even typing this up made me all teary-eyed. Gotta
Yeah,
go
that
wipe
shit's
my
so
eyes and feel better,
fucking
or I'll be
sad.
crying in my office. Dispatchers are the unsung heroes. The emotional
really
and mental
are.
toll that it takes on people that do the job and do it well is crazy. From another thread, answered a call at 3 a.m. from a 7-year-old girl who found mom unconscious on the couch and not breathing. The child knew her address, and it was in the middle of nowhere. 25-minute response at best. I had to talk the kid through getting mom off the couch one arm and one leg at a time because she was too small to just pull her to the floor. Then we started CPR instructions. The kid did great. No neighbors and did not know a phone number for dad. Divorced. We ended up getting mom breathing again just as the ambulance pulled up. I cried like a baby when that was over. I was so relieved for that child.
Damn.
/u/ratchet girl one sort of stuck with me, I guess. Edit, thank you for the gold. But don't give me gold. I didn't do anything. If you feel like giving someone gold, it should be /u/ratchet girl one. The original comment can be found here http://www
Oh my God,
reddit.com/ask/reddit/comment/1x0/911
stop.
operators what is the call _you_have/cb4 doku and find a CPR class. Here http
Holy shit.
www
That was very funny.
/org/hardcore/cprindex/find
It's still going.
a course _UCM_303220 sub homepage.
Everybody
JSP.
should take
When I
CPR
still lived in
classes,
my
by the
hometown,
way.
I used to volunteer on the emergency services
If
department.
y'all haven't,
Being a
fucking
tiny
do
town,
it.
There
Like,
was no
do it.
full-time staff, so people in
You
the
will
town would receive proper
maybe
training
save
and
somebody's
volunteer
life
for it.
someday.
Two incidents
you
always
know?
stuck with me. One was a day when I was setting
Bob
up for a
Odenkirk is
CPR
only
training
alive
course for
because
teens.
of
The station was silent as I was
CPR.
working, until almost every alarm suddenly started going off. Fire, EMS. I could hear the RCMP alarm going off across the street. The radio starts buzzing, and I can hear a Delta call come in for a house nearby. Delta being the second highest level. I knew the family. Kind people. Mom had been downstairs making dinner, and her son was getting ready to go to Scouts.
Nope,
He had
just
tripped
1, 2,
and hung
3,
himself
fuck's
by the
sake.
kerchief. She didn't find him until it was too late. I remember standing in front of the radio in horror as I could hear her screaming in the background of a radio call. As one of the guys was radioing in that they were
This
coming
is the
into
reason
big
my
city
cats
with a
don't wear
high-priority
collars.
call. My father is on both fire and EMS, and was there. He said that all he could think the entire time was we left muddy footprints on their clean carpet. He called my mom in tears, asking her to hurry by and to vacuum it up before the family got home. The other is less tragic, and more just nerve-wracking. Was driving in from school one day, radio goes off. I hear the words, "We have a potential echo level call. Prepare for potential evacuations. West side." It was November, and usually there would be a thick blanket of snow. So far, there was none. Someone, in their infinite stupidity, had thrown a lit cigarette butt out of their car window into a nearby ditch. Nothing but farm fields for miles outside our town, and all of it was on fire. It took the fire departments of 3 towns, and some pretty amazing bravery to get that fire under control. It took 2 days, and by the end of it, 2 farmsteads had burnt down, and our town was under threat of evacuation for the whole time. My stepdad's a firefighter, and he told this story to me and my sister about 5 years ago, and it stuck with me. As a firefighter, he also
Just helped a
attends car
short lady
crashes to
reach
help
her
cut
laundry
people out,
detergent on
etc.
behalf of short
The
ladies
story he told us was
everywhere.
that he was called to a lorry
Thank
and car
you.
collision.
Welcome
which
back,
never end
Laird.
well, really. In the car were 3 adults and 1 young girl about 6 to 7.
I use
If
breakaway
memory serves
collars
me
for
right,
that
it was
reason.
the
Yeah,
family
our neighbor's
friend
dog even
driving,
once
with
got
the
caught on
others
the
in
bottom of the
back with
fence,
the
and my
little
dad
girl
had to
in
get
the
him
middle
untangled.
backseat.
That shit
They
is
crashed into a lorry and the car went under
no
it,
good.
decapitating all the adults but missing the girl. She had to sit in that car, surrounded by the decapitated bodies of her family and friend for around 4 hours before they could get her out. He also told us about how when brains are splattered across the windscreen it reminds him of raw mints. I guess when you deal with that stuff a lot you grow kind of immune to it. Edit, should clarify. A lorry is the British term for truck. Like a 8-wheeler truck for transporting things. As a 911 dispatcher, please read the following. This question is great on Reddit, and even in a personal question with a close friend. But please, 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 do not ask this question in public, and especially at any social format. Many of us dispatchers have very difficult calls that can linger with us for years. It can be hard to talk about, and in front of a group.
I am
gathering,
100%,
it can
I'm
induce
going to pause
anxiety.
it.
Just
I am 100% guilty of having asked these uncomfortable fucking questions back before I like realized how fucked up that was to just like make somebody confront their trauma while they're in front of people. I definitely used to do that because I thought it was like edgy and cool, and I was like, no, dog, I can handle it. Not even thinking about whether or not they could, because they lived through it and they're here. Like, obviously they can handle it. You know what I mean? It's such a stain on me. I feel so guilty every time I think about that shit. Like 100%. It's awful. Anyway, don't be like I was, guys. This is such good fucking advice. Like, yeah, 911 dispatchers, soldiers, you like even people that have been in prison, stuff like just don't. Those questions that you're thinking about asking, unless you are sure that they would be okay with you asking that question in private, like this is good. This is just good advice. Just follow this advice.
Just bear that in mind. Thanks. Not a 911 operator, but my aunt is. The call she hated the most was trying to coach a new mother to give CPR to a 5-week-old. That died while she was still on the line before paramedics could get there. I do actually work for a 911 center. The call that has stuck with me the most was a call for 2 unconscious toddler twin girls. The mom called frantically because both weren't breathing. I stayed on the phone until help arrived, but there wasn't much we could do. The full story, which we rarely get by the way, is that the family went to bed early in the morning. The
Both
twins
of
woke
them
up and
weren't
got up about
breathing?
2 hours before mom. The 8-year-old took them to her bed and covered them with a blanket, causing them to both suffocate. The real disturbing part is that by the time the officers and paramedics got there, the mom had changed their clothes and rubbed baby oil on them to give them that life look. No criminal charges filed. Edit: I work for a fairly large department, so there are a lot of stories. I don't want to clog the comments, but it's not unusual for a seasoned dispatcher to take calls of people dying on the phone, suicides on the phone, listening to violent crimes like robberies in progress. It's the nature of the job. The only calls that really stick with me are the ones where children are hurt physically or mentally. Oh yay. And I heard a coworker take a call from a guy that was actively stabbing his girlfriend in the face.
Oh my
Okay,
God.
now that you've heard all this, go try to have a good day. 911.
I mean, it depends on why they were in
call
prison. Maybe a
operators
little
of Reddit. How do you
discomfort
tell the
is due.
difference
Okay,
between
I
a
have
distress
kind of
call
a
where
hot
someone
take
may
on
be trying to
this.
contact the police
It's
without
kind
alerting an
of,
attacker
I'm gonna
or
say
just an
it,
accident?
and I'm gonna lose some respect from some of you. That's completely, I'm prepared for that. I think that the vengeance boner that we have in the West is just completely fucking undue. I think that people can be pieces of shit and can be awful, but I think that they're still people. And I think that once, first of all, they've paid their dues the way society has asked them to, and once I don't know. I feel like people just deserve respect no matter what they've been through in their lives, hey? I think that the minute that you start acting like somebody is less than you become as bad as they are. I think like you are valuing a human life as less than your own, and that is what makes murder fucked up. You know what I mean? I feel like really what our justice doesn't exist. You cannot bring people back from the dead. Justice does not exist in a world where like, first of all, people can be hurt and whatever. Justice doesn't fucking exist in a crime with a victim. It just doesn't exist. The best that we can hope for is rehabilitation, and that is what we should aim for. The idea that somebody needs to be punished because they were failed by society and ended up fucked up and sick in the head is so backwards and weird to me. I feel like people that are in prison are victims too. I see that, but I always felt like if I did something to ruin someone's life, I deserve what happens after. I mean, I feel like I would feel that way too if I did something really, really heinously bad like that. I don't know, man. It feels like I don't feel like I would pass that judgment on to someone else. No, yeah, there's a big issue of thinking we need to punish people further and further rather than helping people grow beyond their mistakes in the position that made them see those mistakes as necessary. Yeah, agree. Like rehabilitation is the only way forward. That's the closest thing that we will ever have to justice. Even if they made bad decisions or desperately need help, they are still human and should be treated with basic human dignity, even if they are serving their punishment as society decides. That is remorse. Most people should feel that. Some don't. And you know, I feel like we have juries that are capable of making informed decisions and agreeing on things. It's just that we have to change society's way of looking at what happens to a person after they commit a crime, right? I think that as we become more informed on people's mental illnesses, I think that it's so important that we put them in places to be studied and to be talked to and to be treated. We have to be less taboo about crimes that are more... We have to do away with taboos. People need to be comfortable coming forward and saying, hey, I think this thing that society deems heinous. Like, I love the idea of killing someone or whatever. Somebody needs to be able to recognize that that is a bad thought that they don't want to have and go to somebody to help them. The way our prisons are set up now create more problems than it solves, except for the people that privately own them. Capitalism, baby! Ugh. Yuck. Anyway.
Accidental call / gone off in someone's pocket. How often do accidental calls / discrete distress calls happen? I used
Fucking
to take
hate
911
America.
calls in Norway. Number is
Sorry.
112 for police here though.
Just hate
And one
America.
time I answered, but there was complete silence on the other side. I tried to get some sort of response, but nothing. After a couple of seconds though, I heard
You know you
clicking
made
of
it
a
in
very
life when you
soft
have a
kind.
prison
It was
named
hard to
after you.
understand what was going on, but I understood that something was
Ugh.
wrong. That was when I heard that the clicking was actually someone tapping their nails on the phone to mix. Oh, S with Morse code. Immediately got a police car to the address, and surely enough, there was an armed robbery going on where the mother of the house had managed to hide in a closet right by the one of the robbers. There were two of them. That was holding the rest of the family hostage. It truly could have ended very bad if she didn't
Yeah,
remember or
Laird,
was
that
too
shit
afraid
is
to call sorry about any
groundbreaking, and I
bad
don't know
English.
why we are
Accidental
in.
911
I don't
calls
know
happen
why
all
we
the
didn't
time.
change
The
our
majority
shit
of offenders are
immediately.
offices that have to dial 9 to get
Immediately
an outside
following
line, then dial 1 before
those
the area code.
models
But
that they
dials
put
on cell
forward.
phones. Kids that have an
It's
old cell
insane.
phone that still has a battery and they hit the emergency call button. Any cell phone can dial an emergency call even if it is not activated. Our local policy here is that any 911 call, even if someone gets on the phone to say sorry, the police have to respond to check it out. I did 911 call taking / dispatching for 13 years. Sometimes you just get a feeling. Most computer-aided dispatching programs have features that tell you if you've received calls from a particular number / address / person in the past along with the type of call history. So if I look over call history and see domestic issues, then they are getting a cop no matter what they tell me. But if I'm talking to a little baby and hear the mother walk in the room and take the phone and she says everything's okay with no call history, then I tell my sergeant and let him be the final decision on whether or not there will be a police response. I felt pretty comfortable with my intuition. We handled a call one night where my partner thought she heard a little sniffle on the line when she answered. It was just barely audible and then the line was disconnected. Our system gave us a general GPS location, so we got police started. Then we researched the number and got an exact address. As the officer got to the house, he peeked in the front
You
window
called
and saw a slight
911 all the
movement over
time when you were a
stairs. He
kid?
kicked in the door and found the woman hanging. He cut her down and saved her life. She had called 911 so that officers would find her instead of her family. She later told the officer that as soon as she saw him turn on her street, she strung herself up. Had my partner not paid attention or didn't continue searching for an exact address, that woman would probably be dead. A friend of mine drunkenly decided it was a good idea to call 911
Sorry,
on
I
my
had to get
phone
my
while we
wrist
were at a
a
bar.
small
I quickly hung up, but they called back from a
reprieve
normal
there.
phone number. When I answered to apologize, they asked me a lot of yes or no questions, assuming it was to protect me if someone were telling me what to say. Are you safe? Could you tell us if you were in any danger? But they didn't show up once I confirmed that I was okay. I've also dialed 911 by accident. Once from a hotel that required dialing 9 before the number.
911.
That time I spoke to them. Told them I was okay, but they showed
is
up at our hotel
happening?
room 10 minutes later to check everything out. Not the same, but I do phone systems. We were doing a large install for a multi-building campus. Their old system was such an old POS that 911 either didn't work in some buildings or was run out of a different building, so the address was wrong, etc. I took a significant amount of time setting everything up properly and working with the
911, yeah,
local
it does that a lot.
PD/EMS
It's
to make
funny.
sure that if any of the local fire/EMS/police/911
Also 999.
were called, they got the correct caller ID along with the exact right building. You might ask, how do you test this? Well, in this case, because this was my project, I spent, over time, 2 days, 8 to 8 going to at least half of the phones in the building dialing 911. Due to what these buildings did, the 50% phones and testing every building was of high importance. Hello 911, this is underscore from underscore calling to test. Can you please give me the location which this call resolves to? As you might imagine, that line lasted all of 3 calls. After that it was, me, yo 911.
Oh
same,
man,
or
Uncle
address me,
Guffey.
thanks, click, all day, 2 days straight, 40 plus buildings, hundreds of phones, not one mistake. Client said, and
Boy,
did you test
do
the fire
I.
department? No, and I'm not going to. I'm confident it works. After 2 days of testing I called back, thanked them profusely for putting up with me.
See you
and
later,
sent 2
Laird. Have
pizzas
a
over
good
to them.
one.
I was a 911 operator for 2 years in a very small town, and I dealt with both of these situations. More
Hope
often
to
than
see
not,
you
it was
again
children
soon.
who would call over and over thinking that it was hilarious to hang up in our ears. That is until we sent the cops to their house and would be able to hear the children
Oh,
get
I
spanked.
have so
Then
many
one incident
followers.
happened where a girl called and put the phone in her pocket, and I could hear her crying as her boyfriend beat her and threatened to shoot her, and I had to get officers to the scene without the boyfriend knowing. The girl got out of the room with him long enough to unlock the bedroom window for the officers to enter through. Very scary but very rewarding when the girl was able to thank me face to face. Wow. It must get annoying getting kids and idiots who don't know how to lock their phones. But things like this I suppose make up for it. I was jumping on a trampoline with my older son once and he was bouncing me and I was screaming because I couldn't get up. Turns out I accidentally dialed 911 from my pocket. The police showed up and asked if there was a girl screaming at this address. I had to explain, rather embarrassed, that it was me. I'm a 28-year-old man. Let that sink in. It is very, very difficult to tell when this is genuine, and it is something I worried about as a 999 call handler.
Oh, they
I
said
got a call
999
once
this
from a
time
woman
instead of
who had collapsed at a
999.
church. She was talking normally 1 minute, and the next I could hear her whispering the words help, help. Then she would go back to answering my questions normally and again whisper down the phone, help me. Help me. We are trained to ask them to tap the phone if in danger, but English wasn't her first language. The phone cut out and we advised a crew who went out. Turns out she was talking to a friend and needed her to help translate the call. However, there was another case here where a woman did exactly this. It was a pocket dial and all you could hear was a man asking about a woman and directions, or something similar. Anyway, the call handler ended the call and it turns out she had been kidnapped and murdered eventually. It was horrible and it was something I honestly feared missing. You lot do a very hard job. I can't imagine what it must be like getting an accidental call, dismissing it, and later that night thinking what if that person really needed my help?
Yeah.
One thing that prompted me to ask it was I was walking past an intercom a while back in London.
That's
and
one
I
thing
heard
that
someone
I
asking for
would
help.
just,
help me please
it would
someone.
just stay with
help,
me.
help, I said hello, can you hear me? And there was silence. What number are you? What do when I heard muffled whimpering, what number are you at? I'm going to call the police, I asked again.
Yeah,
silence.
James,
I
they
didn't know
do
what to do at
like
that point,
flesh
and about 30
packs. It's
seconds
really,
later,
really
she
cool.
came back on, don't worry. I am
it's
fine.
so
Are you sure? I
inclusive,
asked,
hey?
she said in a rather quiet way, yes. Thank you. I reluctantly walked away and it still bothers me about 4 or 5 years later. The short answer is, you don't. Almost without exception you will be getting a quick visit from the police. It's not a big deal and no one gets in trouble or anything. But there's no way to tell that you are actually safe unless an officer lays eyes on you. Despite what you read on Reddit, most police officers are really nice folks. They would rather respond to 100 butt dials than show up late to a domestic turned homicide. My wife got a surprise visit from the police one day last year while I was at work. Our younger son, under 1 year at the time, had grabbed her phone from her pocket and somehow connected with 911. She saw him playing with it and said something along the lines of, oh no, someone is in big trouble. Let me have that. Apparently, the phone was sensitive enough to pick up her voice, and they dispatched a couple of police to make sure no one was actually in trouble. She had no idea why they had showed up until they explained what the dispatch had heard, and she put it all together. The best part about it was that when they knocked on the door, she had been painting one of our dining room walls with red paint, and initially the officers thought she had blood on her hands. When I heard about it later, all I could think of was that awesome Super Bowl commercial with the spaghetti sauce and the cat. http://YouTube. BVL
No
104 by
idea.
1 Rafe. I used to be
No
an EMT
idea
in the
what the fuck
catch-all
commercial
dispatch.
they're talking
when
about.
someone would dial 911 and it wasn't clear what was going on, we're dispatched as a sick person and they'd send us, the ambulance, and a police cruiser. So when we were waiting at the station for a call and got sick person, it was always an exciting ride over, not knowing what it would actually be. 90% of the time it was boring or nothing, but there's always that 10%. 911 dispatcher here. When I first started the job I had no idea what the hell I was doing. I had an experienced officer sitting at the desk with me for 3 months. I was the only dispatcher on. After a while you get a feeling talking to people. You understand tones or stress in someone's voice. You also understand when someone is being a prick and fucking around. Either way, you are going to get a knock on your door. If you are pranking 911
What do we think? Do we need
also,
more layers?
Screwing around and
Or
they make sure to give
do you
a
think
nice
this is
talking to.
tall enough?
Call on any other questions that I can answer. I gladly will. I have been a dispatcher for almost 2 years
What do we
now,
think?
as well as police/fire. I will answer the best I can. Hopefully this
Is it
isn't so
done,
stuffed away
or
in
do
these
we keep going?
2,713 comments. What's weird
we do
is,
one more
everyone's
row?
saying if it's ambiguous or a prank they have to go check it out. But I canceled a 911 call
Let's
once
do
and the
one
cops
more.
never came. I was on the street.
This
Some
is how
cracked out
deep
guy
it is.
decided he wanted to
I'm
fight
showing
me,
you the
telling me
depth of
he's
it.
going to kick my ass and actually kicked me a few times. He apparently thought getting into a brawl on the street was perfectly acceptable behavior
Does
for
it fit
whatever
a soda
perceived
can
slight
in
I had
it?
committed towards him.
Yeah.
Well, fuck this. I call the
Hold on.
cops. After a minute of the
I
guy
have a
trying
soda
to
can
yell
right
at my
here.
phone, he started IT. And me saying let's let the cops decide that the guy
It
decided it would
exactly
be a
fits
better
a
idea to
soda
run
can.
and hide. I figure whatever. He's gone. Let's drop it. I told the cops he left. Issue had resolved itself. And they never showed. As someone who has accidentally dialed the emergency number on my new phones 4 or 5 times.
I know those holes
Here's my
looked
time to
big.
shine.
Red
So
is
back
just
when I was
bright.
16 or
The
so, I had
holes
this
are not
stupid
big enough
two-sided
for
phone.
dice to get
One
through.
side was all touch screen with 2 buttons.
Not even
and
those
the other
miniature
side was a
Warhammer
tiny
dice.
screen with the number pad. Anyways, I am at a friend's house and he suggests we go hang out with his neighbors. Alright, no prob. We head over there. We are all sitting in the kitchen when the neighbor guy says, "Oh, here, let
I'm
me
gonna
show
do
you
one
guys
more
this
row,
cool
and I'm
new
gonna
thing I got."
decrease it in
Little
size
did I
just
know
a
my
little.
friend was in on the
Sorry,
whole
I
deal.
needed visual.
So
No,
a couple
no
minutes
sweat.
passes by and my friend says, "Hey, chop chop motherfucker." Look, I ever so slightly turn my head to my left and am face to face with a snake. I have never screamed / jumped up / ran so fast in my life.
And if
I
it
lock
looks
myself
bad,
in
we'll
the
just
bathroom
undo
thinking
it.
I'm safe. Well, these assholes one up me and start shoving the snake under the door. Commence more screaming and me begging them to stop while simultaneously trying to hoist myself onto the sink. I managed to but dial the emergency call option on my phone. So the operator picks up unbeknownst to me and hears me screaming bloody murder saying, "Stop please, for the love of God stop. Please." Finally they stop, at which point my phone rings and I hear, "Ma'am, I have units dispatched to you. Are you in a safe location?" So after calming down and explaining what was going on, the dispatcher asks all persons in the house stand outside and wait for units to arrive. We are outside and we see a helicopter and we are all saying, "I wonder what they are looking for." Units arrive. Check me
Only
out.
2
See snake all the while this
millimeters.
helicopter is in the air. So I
Damn.
ask what the helicopter is looking for. The officer is like, "Oh yes," says something in 10 codes over his radio, and the helicopter beelines out of the area. I've never felt so stupid in my entire life. TLD, our friend scared me with snake, but dialed 911. Dispatcher heard my bloody murder scream, sends helicopter and units out to see snake and make sure I'm okay. I was on the road with my local PD as a crash investigator. So I was on the same radio channels because I was often the first / only person besides rescue, if needed, to show up to a crash. We had hang-ups get called out, but they would always include a number, so the first
Yeah, I
thing
haven't
they
butt
would do is
dialed
call it back from the
anyone
911 station. If that didn't get an answer, they
in
would put out a call with a
sincerely
specific
so
signal
fucking
code,
long.
like a 10 code. That was just a call and hang up with no dialogue. If it seemed like a pocket call or the phone was hidden but they could make out background sounds, they would describe them to the officer. There's a fight or
I
someone
am gonna
crying or
put
something
regular,
loud in the background. The call
I
center
am
has
gonna
call
put
history built into the call
a short
receiving system.
regular
So
row
let's say this
at the
happened 4
top.
times in the last 10 minutes. That would be relayed to
But
the
I do
responding
think that I
officer.
want
If it
to
happened 10
make
times in the last year,
the
that would too, because it's probably a messed up alarm system or something.
I
So,
want
it's
I
case
want
by
it to
case.
taper once.
Ex-dispatcher here. This
and
type
see
of
how
call
it
was
looks.
common. We simply could not tell
So
if
we'll
the person
we'll
is in
undo it if
distress
it
and
looks
active,
bad.
or if nothing is really happening like they are claiming, so we would always send out deputies.
But I
It's
wanna see
very
how it
common to
looks.
send deputies out in one of these situations only to be called out to the same location later in the night for an incident as it escalated after they left. From my perspective, as long as I could hear something on the other end, I would listen and take notes for what is going on as possible. If I couldn't hear anything on the other end, I would stay with the call as long as possible. I also had situations where the person called and pretended to be talking to their sister or something else. I'd have to ask all of my questions with yes or no answers. Are you in danger? Can you get away to somewhere safe? Does the other person have a weapon? Do they have a stick or bat? Do they have a knife? Do they have a gun? Is the person a male? Is the person a female? Are you related to this person? You get the idea. It was like a mini mystery, piecing together what happened until the deputies arrived. Then you'd hear a deputy's voice in the background. Usually they didn't even say goodbye, much less thank you. Frown. I currently work as an emergency
Let's see
call
how this
handler in the
goes.
UK. During a standard shift we end up with a number of silent calls, or calls that have dropped before the operator has passed them to us. When calling 999 in the UK, you firstly go through to a BT operator where they will ask you what service you want. They will then pass you to us, police. If you request more than one service that includes the police, then you will always be put through to us first. We can then call either fire or ambulance. When you have a silent call, you will always try to call them back. While this is happening, you tag the intel team to start completing checks on the numbers, such as whether they have called before and possibly gave an address. If you call from a landline, then the operator
You know
will
what?
know
No,
your
fuck
address.
it.
If you
It's
call from a
fine.
mobile, we
It's
will
so
be given
fine.
approximate location details. Red flags would be previous calls linked to domestic violence, intel objects relating to child neglect or issues in the home. If we have an exact address, such as when people call from a landline, we will always attend. If it's a mobile with no previous calls or intel,
I was
then we will
thinking of
call
how
3
I
times
wanted
and then close
to
pending further
decrease this
calls.
stitch,
If
'cause
anyone
I've
has
never
any
had to
other
do it
questions
before,
relating to the job,
But I
fire
think that
away.
this is gonna
Not
be
sure about
okay. It's the
everywhere,
very
but
top
where
of
I
the
grew
egg.
up, any ambiguous
So,
911
I mean,
call, including silence on the other end, involved sending a police car, an ambulance,
That's
and a
not
fire
where we
truck
were.
just in
Is
case,
it? That
even
is
if they
where
are
we were.
99% sure it's a prank or accident. Hopefully this is similar everywhere, though probably less practical in large cities. I am late to the party, but I was a
Do you anything
911
different
dispatcher.
on this one from the
It
last one? I
relied
made
on
it
a lot
much
of intuition.
smaller.
Honestly, dispatching really requires you to trust your instincts, and they get scarily accurate. When I was training, I learned from a lady who won a national award for her work. We had a call where the female caller said she was in a car accident and hit a tree, but was now at home. She sounded more afraid and upset than most car accident victims, so we pressed for more information. The caller got more upset, so we started asking yes/no questions. Are you hurt? Yes. Are you alone? No. Is your husband with you? Yes. Did he hurt you? Yes. Domestic violence calls are highly dangerous for officers, so it was really important to figure this out and dispatch multiple officers. When we wouldn't have for just a traffic accident, we sent 2 or 3 officers.
So the
It
scales
turned
are the
out that
same,
the
they look
caller
more
had been
pronounced.
assaulted by her husband,
That might just
and
be
he
a
was trying
color
to pass
thing.
it
I
off
don't know.
as
The
injuries
scales
from
are
a car
exactly
accident.
the same.
That job is hard as hell, but very rewarding. Another gut feeling helped me take part in the rescue of a kidnapped child from an Amber Alert. It's one of my proudest moments.
Serious 911 operators
Cool.
of Reddit, what is a call that keeps you up at night? I'm a firefighter and I overheard a call on the radio from another unit. They were dispatched to a possible suicide. The information given, while the crews were en route, was patient's wife came home and found a note under the door saying, "Honey, I'm already gone. If you're reading this, please do not come in and see me like this." The crews arrived, and the next thing you hear on the radio was the paramedic telling dispatch code 4, meaning patient is deceased, and in the
That's sad.
background you can hear the wife screaming bloody murder as loud as she could. It was chilling.
That's really sad.
One thing that makes me horrified to this day was when I was first starting out as a 911 operator. I picked up the phone, and I heard an older woman on the line
Jar
say
Jar
that someone
Binks
was in her
fan
house,
is the
and
name
she
of
didn't
this
have
Reddit
anyone or anything
user.
to protect her. She then told me that she was hiding, and whoever it was, is coming near her. I then heard silence on the line. I later found out she was kidnapped and never found. I still have nightmares about that day and I wish there was something I could do. I had a
Yeah, there
witness
was
to a fatal
much,
motorcycle collision
much
on the phone with me,
more
and he
of
goes, "Someone's crossing the
a
road to help. Oh my god, she
spectrum
just got
of
hit by a car.
color
She's
on
dead
the
too."
last
And he
yarn.
just screamed and screamed and hung up. An off-duty nurse who stopped to help the motorcycle rider was hit by
This
another
one,
car and
the
killed.
colors are
It was on the news later and I
so-
found
the-
out she
the
had a
color
husband and
palette is
2
so
very
much
young
more
kids.
limited.
I was on workers' comp for about 3 weeks while I recovered from that one. I worked the UK equivalent, 999. My job was to route calls to fire, police or ambulance. I had no medical training, and the calls that had me quit were as below. About 9 at night a woman calls calmly asking for an ambulance as her husband had passed out. After 10+ minutes of trying to get London ambulance to answer the phone, she hangs up. I stay on the line and another 10 minutes later they answer. I relay the situation and address, and they confirm they'll do a drive-by, basically get the nearest available unit to visit the property, see what's happening. Half an hour later the same woman calls back, exact same reason for calling. Once again I'm on hold for London ambulance to answer for 10+ minutes. Out of the blue she comes onto the phone and calmly says, "Don't bother, he's just died," and puts the phone down again. This time it doesn't disconnect, and I hear the most heart-wrenching wail of despair from the same woman. She then goes into a teary rant about how useless everything is, and how London ambulance killed her husband, before the line cuts off again. Get through to the ambulance
That's
service,
so
explain
sad.
everything, and the operator confirms the drive-by got cancelled because the ambulance it was assigned to had finished their shift. I didn't sleep that night and cried more tears than I ever had done previously. Next day I went into the office an hour before my shift was set to start, emptied my locker, gave all my work stuff to my boss and quit on the spot. I haven't been dispatching very long so I am sure that I will have plenty of stories. But what immediately comes to mind was a call I took the week after I started talking to people directly. Elderly man came on the line. His voice was slurred, and I had a hard time understanding his address. He apologized and I told him it was because his phone was breaking up. He replied, "Oh. Well, I just wanted you to know that I am going to shoot myself in the head." We had protocol, but my instinct was immediately to plead with him, to tell him help was on the way, and to get him to keep talking to me. I wasn't able to get 2 sentences out before I heard the shot. Dead on arrival. 2 hours later, I get a call from the same address. A woman screaming that she hadn't heard from her father, a cancer patient, after his daily nap. She came to check on him and found a blood-soaked recliner in the backyard. I will never forget that stupid address or his
That's
voice.
So sad.
My dad is a
God.
paramedic in the UK. He told me that dead or dying babies are the worst calls to go to. You hear it on the radio and your heart just sinks. There were 2 calls he told me about that have really stuck in my mind. One of them, a woman had been
Yes,
cut in half by a
Hacksmat.
train.
I
Because
do
of the
crochet.
positioning,
I crochet
she
a
was
lot.
still
I
alive
just
as the bleeding was
taught
plugged.
myself
When they moved her, she
how
died.
to
The
knit
second
as
one was a
well,
16
but I
years old
only
girl who
know
had died on the train tracks after touching the live
one
rail.
move,
Dad
and I
said calls
don't know
like that are
whether it's
uncommon,
a
but
knit
because I
or
was
a
about
purl
17,
stitch.
at the time all he could think about was that it could have been me.
I used to know a lot more, so
I
I'm
worked for
sure it will
411.
come back
I
pretty
got fired
easily
because a girl
once I
called,
look
begged
into
me
it.
not to hang up on her. She can only function via computer, and her computer
But
was
I
dead.
I
All she
am
wanted was a phone
baffled
number to
without a
call
little
HP.
bit of guidance.
It took me half an hour, and our average call was 1.36 minutes. I had 5 different bosses from 5 floors come yell at me. "You should have hung up on her, charged her, and then she could just keep calling," is what they told me. Fuck that, I quit right then and there. No one is ever going to yell at me for helping another human being. No one, I don't care if you are a shareholder of TTS. I may not be an operator anymore, I quit being one, now I'm a handyman anyway. I answer the call
Crochet
and
is
hear a
really
woman
hard
gasping
for
for
you?
air.
Oh,
I ask
no.
her over and over. Then I hear chalking and a man saying, "You bitch, you tried to call the police on me." A second later, I hear screaming. I inform them, and they figured out it was from
sucks.
New
I'm
Mexico
sorry
to this
to
day.
hear
I
that.
still wonder how they called us in Nick. About a year and a half ago now, I received a call from a man that said his girlfriend was on the toilet and bleeding. I asked him if she was pregnant, which she was about 3 to 4 months along. I then asked to get her off the toilet, in which he does. As soon as he got her off the toilet, he saw his child in there. I proceeded to ask if the child was breathing and he said it was. After about a minute went by of me trying to walk him through some instructions, he tells me the baby stops breathing. At this point I provided him with CPR instructions, to which he seemed to do the best he could with them. I disconnected the phone when medics arrived on scene and never found out the end result,
Definitely, you
but it
have
can
to
pretty
pay
much
your
be
dues.
assumed.
You have to
My
put your time
supervisor
in. You
allowed
have
me
to
to walk
pay
that one
attention
off for a
to
few
every
minutes.
little thing.
My heart goes out to that man for being as calm as he sounded at that situation, because I have no idea how I'd react firsthand. I've also had multiple calls from people where their significant others shot themselves in the head. Also a 16-year-old that was found in the woods by their parents. They hanged themselves. Many hunting calls, but none quite compared to the first, because I have absolutely no idea how I would react in that situation. Disclaimer, I'm not the operator that took the call, but the one
You
that
think
had to
you
make
need a
it
bigger
on behalf
hook?
of my
I
next door
definitely
neighbors.
recommend
It was
starting
my
with
first basic apartment
big
after moving out,
stuff.
and had been there maybe 2
Big
months when a young
yarn,
couple with a new baby
big
moved in
hook.
next door. They were struggling, didn't have a phone, because they couldn't afford it. I wasn't great off financially either, but worked for an electronics retailer that sold Sprint after it had first come out, and so got it for almost nothing to promote them to customers, so I never bothered with a landline. They didn't have good coverage in the area at the time, so dropped calls were frequent at home, bad enough that calling my mom once a week on Sunday involved me taking a walk to avoid that. One night I get home late from work, make something to eat, start to relax, and sit down in front of the TV when I get a knock at the door. I had had a long day at work, it was late, and I wasn't expecting anyone, nor was I in a mood to talk to anyone, so ignored the first knock. There were other college kids that lived there, and I thought it was the drunken wrong door sort of thing. I hear a knock on another door a second later, and I guess he got no answer there either, because a minute later he's back at my door pounding even harder. What the fuck, man, it's late. I open the door, and he charges in a couple steps with this wild look in his eyes. I thought he was on something at first, so I go into defense mode. Can I use your phone, he asks. I only have a cell phone that doesn't really work that well around here. That's fine, I need to call 911. And then tears. My baby, I think he's dead. He almost shouted dead. Oh, shit. I grab my phone and dial, then hand it to him sort of dumbfounded. I had to take it back from him and relay to the operator. He was too distraught to get the address and details out, so I tried to stay calm and took the phone back. Yes, I'm the neighbor, this is the address. He just found his baby blue and not breathing in his crib, etc. all sort of detached. We were close to a fire station, so the
Sequin art
operator
is
gave
so
me an aid of just a
fun.
few minutes, which I told him and motioned to him to head
wanna
back
get
over
into
and
sequin
stayed
art.
on until I could confirm
fucking
emergency
love
services
sequins and
arrived. I heard them
sparkles.
wailing through the
Oof.
shared wall. Come on, breath. I think they were trying CPR. The EMTs arrived
you
and
have
calmly started walking into my
anything
place
that
with a
you'd like
stretcher.
to share
I had
with
kept the
us,
door open in
Hacksmath,
case the
feel
guy
free to
needed something
post
else,
it.
so I had to direct first responder traffic, then explain to them, and a cop that showed up what I knew about the situation. I never saw my neighbors again after that. A day or so later
love
was my day
supporting
off,
each
and I
other
got a
here.
knock early that afternoon. An older woman greets me and says that she's the mom of my neighbor and asked me if I was the guy that called 911, said she wanted to thank me for making the call. I said it was no trouble, but I felt like a real asshole inside for not answering the first knock, kept that last part to myself. I asked how he was doing, and she said he didn't make it. She was fighting tears, she just lost her baby grandson only a day and a half ago. Over the course of the day his parents moved everything out. I guess it hurt too bad for my neighbor to go back in there. I didn't think to offer to help, I was too dumbfounded over the whole situation. It bothered me a lot, not offering to help with the moving and ignoring the first knock, and I didn't sleep very well for a few nights until I talked to my boss about why I was dragging at work. He was a volunteer sheriff's deputy in a neighboring county in his off time from the store, so he'd seen this kind of thing before and assured me that by the time my neighbor found his son it was probably already too late, but still. This was in '99, but I still think about them every so often, if they managed to stay together after, that sort of thing. Welcome to r/Credit by Haunted TTS.
Oh man, okay.
Subscribe and like this video for more, and don't forget to click that bell button for notifications.
That's so jarring when it goes to the next thread, hey?
911 operators, what call scares you till this
911.
day? Sometimes the calls that stick with you aren't the most physically traumatic. I once had a call from a 17-year-old kid who came home from a sleepover to find that his mother had moved. Just packed up his sister and everything in the house and left while he was gone with no forwarding address or information.
What the
She also turned
fuck?
off his cell phone that morning, so literally the only number he could call was 911. He was trying so hard not to cry, and his voice was shaking as he kept apologizing to me for calling 911. He just didn't know what else to do and had no other family. She also took everything, so all he had was a couple of things that he had taken to the friend's house. He told me his 18th birthday was in a couple of weeks, and he literally had nothing. The officers that responded took him to a shelter.
Post it right
I
in the
think about him
chat,
often,
bud.
and I hope he's okay.
Right in the chat.
Even if he was a kid who got in trouble or had behavioral issues, I can't imagine coming home to find your mother has abandoned you. Not one
That's so
specific
sad,
call,
dude.
but suicide calls where the caller has no interest in seeking help, but just wanting the police to find them before their family does. Knowing you're likely the last person to speak to someone and there's nothing you can do to help is pretty rough. Family member worked as police
I can't
dispatcher.
imagine that was
Received
any
a
good
call
at
from an
all.
elderly woman. Her husband had just been killed in their garage by an intruder. She heard it happening. She's wheelchair bound, but phone was next to her. She frantically begged my family member to help her. While he was on the phone with her, the criminal cut her throat. My family member stayed on the line 3 more minutes until cops got there. He could hear the
so
sounds of the
sad.
attack, her
Fuck,
gasping and
dude.
gurgling noises. He kept telling her help was coming and to hold on. Amazingly, she survived. Criminal was later caught. A 17-year-old who just wanted the thrill of killing someone and picked them at random. He's on death row now.
That's
Not scared,
I'm
just
not
kinda
surprised
haunted.
that he's
This
on
past
death
Mother's
row.
Day,
That's
I had
very,
a teenage
very
boy calling because he
cold-blooded.
found his mother overdosed and dead. The sobbing as he called out "Mom, Mom," still makes me tear up. Every call where
Yeah.
someone is reporting an unresponsive relative. Some will let you walk them through the CPR process. If they don't know it, some won't. Every one of them, you hear the caller at some point pleading with the patient to not leave them. Most times they do though. Parents, spouses, children, I've had them all call. Never gets easier. Didn't really scare me, but touched me deeply. Lady calls in, she stopped to visit elderly couple she knew because she had not heard from them. The elderly man had dementia. Apparently his wife died in her sleep days before and he didn't realize and had been getting in bed with her nightly. Not an operator,
Oh, that's
but heard
awful.
the story. The woman had gotten out of her car and shut the door and went around to get her infant out of the car seat. As she walked to the kid's door, the car locked itself and she left the kid.
Imagine that in a Sam Raimi movie. Like 1,000,000% just viewed that happening to an old man in Sam Raimi fucking blue filter. Jesus. To be fair, that sounds like what happened to my cousin's kid when he turned of age. They cut him loose and moved because they weren't legally bound to care after him anymore. The one who shot his cousin. That's so sad, dude.
Key inside.
Can't fucking hang
So this
with
kid
that
is
shit.
stuck in the
That's
car
so
and it is a
sad.
hot summer day, so she immediately calls 911. Well, the operator told her it did not qualify as an emergency and hung up. So the mom picked up a branch and smashed the back windshield and rescued her kid. Operator got fired. I wasn't, but my dad's longtime GF was a 911 operator. She was an absolute
no
angel
way
on
that's
earth,
real,
but she had the
right?
most heartbreaking stories. Worst I can think of was an older woman who called 911 because her husband had locked himself in their bedroom and refused to come out, despite her begging and pleading. The lady exclaimed, "He's in there and he has a gun, please hurry." While the operator was trying to keep her calm and talk her down, she heard the unmistakable pop of a gun. I can't imagine the wailing on the other end of the phone after that poor lady had to listen to her husband committing suicide through the door. I have two. 1. A call from a male who stated he'd found his girlfriend's son unresponsive. Very frantic caller. He and the mother passed the phone back and forth multiple times while I tried to give various rescue instructions. That part wasn't all that abnormal, but they later took the male into custody and I found out the initial caller had strangled the kid and then freaked out and called. Still makes me mad and it's been years. 2. Not mine, but a call they played for us in state
I
training.
just can't
An elderly
imagine
man had a complete psychotic break and killed his wife with a hammer.
strangling somebody.
Afterward he calmly called 911 and confessed. The dispatcher attempted to give rescue instructions up until he realized the damage was extensive enough that her head was mostly gone. Several of the
Hell
first
yeah,
officers
thanks,
on scene were
Hackmat.
violently ill because of how bloody the house was. I was a
Whoa, what the
911
fuck?
operator. I get a call one night of a woman crying. Not abnormal, people don't tend to call 911 on good days. She's crying but trying to hold it together. Her son fell in the bathroom and isn't responding to her. She can crack open the door a little bit but can't open it because he has fallen against the door and the bathroom is small. She can see in a little bit. Her grown-up son is living with her. He went into the bathroom to do some drugs. I don't know what kind,
I clicked on it,
was
but
the
I
kind
can't
you
look at it
inject
yet.
with a needle. We know this because she can see the needle hanging from his arm. I asked if this had ever
I will,
happened
though.
before. She
I
said
will
yes. She gave me his age, mid-20s, and her address and some other things I needed. While I'm talking to her, I can hear in every word this woman speaks the tremendous love and fear of a mother for her child.
Oh, fuck,
Her son
okay,
is
here we
dying
go.
or is dead, and she knows it, but she can't do anything but stay as calm as possible to answer my questions. She was holding on, but I could hear it in her voice. He was in his 20s, but it was her baby dying on that floor and she couldn't do a thing about it. That was about 8 years
That's
ago.
very
I still
fucking
feel
sad,
upset
man.
when I think about that call even now. Rescue got there and he did live, but that doesn't change how I remember feeling. That poor mother. I'm going to do another one, because this thread is a bummer, and we all need a laugh. I assure you, not making any of this up. There was a ranch on the edge of the city limits in my area, right by a large park and swimming hole. That ranch had a variety of livestock,
Are
but
you
they had
close
an
with your
issue with
brother's
their pygmy
girlfriend?
goats.
That's
Every
sweet.
few
I
weeks
love-
we'd get a call, because
I love
100 little
when
goats were roving through the park or down the street.
My partner
One
has
day,
siblings
I
and
took
they
that
like
call
me.
from a
I
man
love
in the
that.
park who had been chased by the goats into a porta potty. He was frantic, like, screaming. You need to send animal control out here right now. And all the while, I could hear two other prominent, repeated sounds, the whack of little goat
She's like a
noggins
sister to
rattling
me. I
against the
love
plastic
that.
porta potty,
I
and
love
bleeding.
that.
Malevolent,
So
incessant
happy
bleeding.
for you.
What did those goats want? What would they have done had he not found refuge? We'll never know. This was 10 plus years ago, but one night I had a call from a woman who jumped out of a moving vehicle to escape a sex assault.
You're pretty
Suspect was
likable,
an
Doxy.
ex-boyfriend who had done it in
Yo.
the past.
You would be surprised, okay? I'm a specific flavor, I think. There are people that a lot of people find me very impolite. A lot of people find me very abrasive. And that's okay with me because I wouldn't want to hang out with people that I can't tell them about my butt problems. I'm a human, dude. You have to hear about how my belly is hairy and I wax my mustache and sometimes I poop blood. Like you have to hear about that if you want to hang out with me. If you don't want to hang out with me, if you don't like that, I understand. It's okay. My girlfriend has two brothers and we're all cool. That's so good to hear. I love that. People who are too nice make me nervous. Yeah. I mean, it's big time Shannon hours, hey? J-Rod, it's love bombing when people are too nice. You're an amazing fluffy person who loves swearing in butts. Shannon! Yeah. Okay, I'm pausing.
Luckily she was still able to run, but she was definitely injured and had no idea where she was, and this was when a cell phone's location was just the closest
Obviously,
cell tower.
we get to the coolest
She was,
fucking shade of
understandably,
green right
hysterical
at the
and
end
I
of
spent the
this
first few minutes trying to
bag.
get her
This is
calm
like a
and quiet
sherbet
enough to
green
avoid
color.
detection.
It's so
She
pretty.
found one of those big green electrical boxes
It's
to
so
hide
pretty. It's
behind
like
for a few
jade
minutes while the
green.
suspect drove back and forth looking for her. Once she couldn't see the headlights anymore, she was able to coherently speak to me, and we determined she was in an office park. There were building numbers, but she wasn't near a street sign, so that wasn't very helpful. I told her to check the nearest mailbox and to read me the address on any mail that she could find. It took her a minute or two of running
Can we
behind
get like an
buildings to locate a
infamy
mailbox,
wrestling match?
but when she
Hope
did we were
versus
able to
Shannon?
pinpoint her
Oh,
location.
man.
Half of the deputies in my county responded,
be a
and the happy
fun
ending to the story is that the suspect was still in the office
little
park, and when he
game.
tried to flee on foot, Chewie caught up to him and made the arrest. Oh, Chewie was a 120-pound German Shepherd who served a long and distinguished career at my agency. This wasn't a call that necessarily keeps me up at night, but it was the scariest in the moment call I ever took. Not scary, but will definitely stick with me for the rest of my life. Answered a 911 call about an unresponsive male driver passed out at a stop sign. I got the
green
info
tea
and
ice
dispatched
cream.
units to the scene.
Mm.
Realized moments later that
Green
the
tea
vehicle
and
the
desserts
caller
is just so good.
described was my own.
Y'all,
It was my 26.
y'all, I'm about to drop the hottest knowledge on you. You guys, I'm telling you, as soon as you can, at your next convenience, you absolutely must make hot chocolate with green tea. Like, make the green tea and then mix in your hot cocoa mix and then add whatever milk or cream or whatever you normally do. It is perfection. It is so fucking delicious. It tastes like Christmas. It's amazing. I love it so much. You should, like, you guys have to do it and report it back to me how you feel about it. Do you do honey in your green tea? I don't really like my hot tea. Like, I don't like coffee or tea to be sweetened. I like it with cream. I do not like it with sugar. And by cream, as a matter of fact, and I'm going to lose some people here. I understand it's one of my cheap, poor people things that I just developed a taste for it, but I like the non-dairy powdered creamer. I like it way better than any liquid creamer. Green tea plus honey plus hot choco mix. I've never tried it before. I bet it would be good with that because I like a sweet hot cocoa, right? It's malt. I also like malt. Green tea, not matcha tea, which is green, yeah. I have never and will never put anything in my tea. I find it nasty. Even honey in my tea makes me cringe. Lita Cakes, you gotta try it with hot cocoa. I'm telling you, you have to try it with hot cocoa. It is so amazing. It blew my fucking mind. It was just like a weird high experiment that me and Josiah did. I've since had it sober and can confirm it is so fucking good. Maltodextrin is the main ingredient to dry creamers and those vanilla wafer cookies. Huh, good to know. Irish breakfast tea, 1/5 milk and 1 tablespoon of sugar. And you only drink raspberry tea. Okay.
6-year-old Sohu had overdosed on heroin and Xanax. He was
I
at a
just
road
like
literally
iced
100 feet
black
from
tea.
dispatch
That
and
shit
EMS.
is my jam.
We made it there at the same time.
But I like
Narcan saved his
hot
life.
tea also.
Heck, currently in rehab for the next year and
But
is rocking it.
My favorite way to drink tea
I shadowed
is
a
just
911
black
operator.
iced tea.
We got a call from
So
an
fucking
8-year-old who
delicious.
said his big brother was in the bathroom and hasn't been out for an hour, and there was no sound. He broke the door open somehow while he was on the phone with us, and his brother was dead from suicide, hanging. This was small town, and a year prior that same older brother had called in when the mom had committed suicide herself on pills. Hearing that kid cry will always haunt me. I decided not to become a 911 operator. My dad wasn't a 911 operator, but a deputy sheriff in a small town. In the late 70s, his sister caught her boyfriend in bed with another woman. She tried to emasculate him with a 12-gauge shotgun, but instead severed his femoral artery, and he bled out immediately. My dad was the only law enforcement officer on call that night. I remember him getting the phone call. He had to go investigate the scene, and then found his sister at a nearby bar. He arrested her there, and she eventually went to prison.
Go
I can't
almost
imagine
all the way
having to
around.
incarcerate my own sister. He's a tough, honorable guy.
I only
Apartment
did one
fire,
fucking
woman
double
burned alive on
crochet
her balcony
here.
because she was too afraid to jump. The screams over the radio of the fire crews trying to rescue her. 20
Oh, wait,
minutes
that's
later
not
we get a
true. I
call
just
for a young man that
crocheted
walked in
it
front
stupid.
of a dump truck on a highway to take his own life.
We're good.
All
We're
crews
good.
were
We're good.
responding to
Everything's
that.
fine.
A
I'm a big
10-year-old girl
Dumbo.
who hung
Please
herself
violate
was
my
found
face.
by her
Please don't
mother.
violate my face.
I was still quite
I don't
new
know
the
why
day
I
all this
always
happened,
end it
but
with
I will
please
never forget
violate
what
my
I heard
face.
that
I
day.
don't want anybody to do that.
Former 999 call taker here. One call that stayed with me was from a woman whose daughter was choking on pizza. She had the phone on speaker, which was needed, because just after giving the address the caller just started screaming. The most hair-raising screaming I'd ever heard. Then she started screaming, "She's dead, she's dead, she's dead," over and over again. Her husband was following my instructions in the background, no idea how he could hear me over the screaming. The crew got there quickly, but the patient didn't make it.
Screaming
Just by
sounds so
typing
much
this
more
out, I can
shrill
hear her
over the
screaming
phone.
again. I work for the equivalent, here in the UK. Not my call, one from a training session we had going. An elderly gentleman had called 999 as he was feeling faint, tight chest and struggling to breathe. He wasn't in the house on his own, his son was downstairs, but he wanted to call in private due to his son being a warrior. He collapsed
That is
mid-call.
an
The operator
interesting
frantically dispatched
ponderance,
somebody to go around and help.
Azuma.
However, in the process of this, the sounds that man was making were horrific. Almost like a squeal, then turning into a grunting, high-pitched groan. I genuinely can't explain it. He sadly passed away by the time the crew had arrived down to a massive heart attack. His son didn't even know what was happening until the police and paramedics turned up. Safe to say the son was devastated, and hearing him scream was just as bad. His son sadly killed himself a month later.
That's very sad,
Nothing
yeah.
scared me, but there are calls that stick with you forever. Family finding another family member committed suicide. Mother calling saying a
Committed.
neighbor molested her young daughter. Officer shot by a guy with a warrant. Officer committing suicide. People dying while you're on the phone with them, or with someone with them. I answered those calls for 16 years. I was happy to get out. Former Leo. Had a dispatcher that needed some therapy after this one. Rural County Sheriff's Office is where
Oh
we worked.
yeah, no, don't
Dead
feel
of winter.
stupid. It's
Roads
a
were
dice
slick with a
bag
glaze
that
of ice
is
on top
made
of the
to look
driven on
like a
hard-packed
dragon's
snow.
egg.
A rural mail carrier had lost control of her vehicle and rolled her Jeep Grand Cherokee on its top. Due to her delivering mail, her window was open, and during the crash the vehicle had rolled on top of her arm. She was pinned, but managed to call 911. While en route, we could hear the panic in our dispatcher voice when she said the vehicle had caught fire. On a summer day it would have taken us about 15 minutes running lights and sirens. Due to road conditions it took about 30. Every time my dispatcher keyed up on the mic to give us further information, I could hear the screams from the caller. By the time we got there she had expired. Our dispatcher listened and tried to talk to this woman while she was burning alive. She was absent for like a month while she got everything sorted out. I think of both of them often. Not an operator, but about 10 years I had to do a court-mandated class at a coroner's office.
My
In
3D
this
printer
class
can
they
make
have a
that
recording
better
of a
and also more
911 call placed by a
durable.
lady whose husband
Okay,
had gotten so
sick.
drunk he didn't recognize his
I
own
just
wife
like
in their
to
home,
make
so he
them.
grabbed a knife thinking she was an intruder. Despite her pleading with him
That's
and calling his name,
rad
he
that
ended
you
up stabbing her
can
to death.
make a
I want
cool-
to
like,
say over
you
30
can make
stab
one
wounds.
that's like
Her screams
pliable
and
and
begging
stuff.
her husband to remember were gut-wrenching. Eventually
You
she
could
stops
definitely do
making
one
any
that's just
kind
like
of sound, and you can hear their young
collapsible.
daughter come out
Hey,
of her room and call out to her, only to be met with silence. It's then you can tell the woman is no longer breathing. I will hear those screams and begging until the day I die. My mom wasn't a 911 operator, but she was a sexual assault center volunteer when I was in elementary school. And would get calls routed to our home number. She would talk to women who had just been raped. Just listening to her side of the call was traumatizing for me. Got a 911 call with just screaming.
like
Nothing
Black
intelligible,
Mathra.
just the loudest screaming you've ever heard. I started officers to the house. Then a kid started yelling that her uncle was trying to kill her, her sister, and her grandmother. She started screaming again, there was a thud, and then no more sound. Officers got there and a man walked out into the driveway and said, "I did it. I killed them." He was mentally ill and lived with his mother. She had been trying to get him committed, with doctors saying he wasn't a danger
very
to himself or
sad.
others. His 9-year-old twin nieces were visiting from out of state. He snapped that morning. Bludgeoned them all with blunt objects, including a large vase. His mom and one niece died. One twin survived with
I've been
extensive
building some
injuries.
one-shots for my
It was
friends,
a
making
horrifying
new
call.
character tonight. Warforged Druid, fun. I think that Warforged is such an interesting choice for a
911
druid.
responders. What is a call that you will
very
never
much
forget?
like that.
Man called to report a male was breaking into his neighbor's vehicle across the street. A few minutes into the call the man came and started to break into the
Yeah,
caller's vehicle.
Warforged
A
druids.
few minutes later the man spotted my caller and broke into
That's
his house
fun.
from the window. Spent 10 minutes listening to physical fight when I finally heard the police enter
I
the
like
house
that.
and say there's blood everywhere. Both intruder
Oh,
and caller
no,
died.
I just thought it was a
and
reference
another
to
911
Zoidberg.
dispatcher
I'm
had my
pausing.
caller's
Zoids is anime for like kids,
Okay,
like Pokemon kind of,
okay.
about giant robots that turn into animals. And there are toys. They're like Transformers, but they turn into animals.
Okay.
So I had a Warforged named Zoid because he turned into like robotic animals.
Okay, that's sick.
That's all.
Okay, did you just come in here from your office because you heard the word druid?
No, I was on my way to pee, but then I was like, oh, I'll stop for a druid chat.
Okay, okay. I'm very in love, you guys.
wife and kids on another line who were hiding upstairs and heard everything. I talked a lot of people who were shot, stabbed, beaten in the final moments of their lives, but you usually get them after the situation occurred. This caller was just trying to look out for his neighbor and I spent a good 15 to 20 minutes bantering while waiting for officers to arrive and get the auto thief. Getting to joke around and get to know someone's personality before they violently die hit a lot different than taking a call after violence had occurred. I'm not a first responder, but in 2007 my 4 friends and I were driving home at 2 a.m. one night on the highway. No, we were not drinking that night, and up ahead in the distance, I could faintly see something in the middle of the road. It was pitch dark, and I slowed down and kept saying, WTF is that?" over and over again. Well, we slowed down and realized it was a black car with no headlights on just sitting in the middle of the road, demolished. I pulled over and me and all my friends sprinted to the car and checked it to see if anyone was inside. There was a woman in driver's seat who definitely didn't survive the initial crash, face just completely embedded into the windshield. I can still see this image till this day, and we were looking as fast as we could because we were in the middle of I-95 and thankfully no other cars had come by. We heard a child faintly crying and my friend looks in the backseat and sees there is a child in a car seat who didn't look injured, so we tried to open the door and it wouldn't fully open due to the damage to the car, so we all had to pull at this door too. It opened, and let me tell you, as easy as it sounds, that was no easy task for 4 18-year-old kids, but eventually we got it open just enough to get in there and pull the child out. We get to the side of the road, and in the blink of an eye a semi comes full speed and pulverizes the car and drags it about 100 feet before coming to a complete stop. We called the state police and they came 15 minutes later, and we waited with the child until they came and questioned us. We were called heroes by all the officers. Later investigations revealed that she came around the turn too fast and hit the guardrail and died on impact. On the way home nobody made a fucking sound.
Yeah, I imagine.
I do search and rescue work.
Jeez.
Got a call to respond to a missing lady in her 60s, gone overnight.
Good golly,
Police
some
have
of
been
these
searching
are
for
real
hours with no luck,
heavy.
so by the time I got there she had been missing for over 16 hours. This was my K9's first search
I mean,
ever,
they're
so I
all
was super
really
nervous but
heavy.
also proud that we could help. The police kept trying to hold me to a small 10-acre set of woods, but my gut said trust my dog, she wasn't there. The police officer got angry with me and decided to go back to the 10 acres while I continued with my K9 into a new area. 5
That's
minutes later my
amazing.
dog gives an alert and I watch which way she went. I climbed over a huge tree to find the lady standing
My
there in
partner
shock.
just brought
She
me
went passed out as
cheese.
soon as I said who I was
Fucking
and asked her what her
hero.
name was. After years of being told I was wasting my time, my dog was shit, and if I wanted to do SAR I should get a real dog. It was the most amazing feeling in the world. My K9 is almost retired, has multiple fines and a recovery under her paws now, and she is just simply amazing. I'm not a first responder anymore, but one
Nice.
of my first arson cases
Nice.
was an absolutely hilarious disaster. This husband and wife hated each other, but didn't want to get divorced. What they did want was a new house.
Nice.
So they poured kerosene on approximately 60 rags and stuffed them under the end table next to the couch. Then
Oh,
placed
I
an
thought
empty
I saw
kerosene
another
lamp
one
on the
appear. I
end
did
table.
not.
Then they took a 5-gallon gas can full of gas, took the spout off, and placed it in their master
Nice.
bedroom
That one's
closet.
on the house.
They're completely devoid of all clothing master bedroom closet, except for 2 jackets with tassels with the price tag still on them. Then they opened all their safes and left them empty and open in the middle of the bedroom. Then they took all the pictures out of the house and replaced them with random photos they printed off the internet. Then they removed the televisions and replaced them with old TVS. They put the flat screen televisions in their barn. Then they poured a clear trail of gasoline down the hallway. Their alibi was that on the day of the fire, they were trying to sell their canoe. They finally got a buyer, but the only time they could meet the buyer was at 3 a.m. that night. So they drove 2 hours away to sell a canoe at 3 a.m. the very same night. They then tried to claim the unlit non-electric kerosene lamp must have exploded. Then they claimed that their crackhead neighbors were trying to frame them for arson. Then the husband claimed that his wife was trying to frame him for arson because she's quote a Blackfoot Indian and they are notorious for not wanting to work. Then he
Oh my
claimed that Sears was
God.
trying to frame him for arson because they were tired of paying his settlement after being injured at work 25 years prior. It was a good time. 18-year-old took mephedrine and attacked his mother with a knife. She locked herself in the bathroom and called 999.
What is
UK here.
mephedrone?
We turn up and the
Is
son
that
is
the,
butt-ass naked climbing out the
quit
window in the front door
heroin
which he'd
drug?
smashed. He gets taken to the ground and cuffed. Me and another managed to crawl through the window without cutting ourselves and find mother inside. Place is covered in blood smeared up the walls, and every knife from the kitchen bloodied and discarded round the house. The adrenaline is just starting wear off as the paramedics arrive for mum, and as they're treating her, we go to the kitchen and find a dismembered member sat on the worktop. Turns out the kid had cut his own penis off after his mum locked herself in the bathroom. If you Google meow meow, slang name for mephedrine, one of the first results is an article about this call in Rolling Stone magazine, although they say he was hanging out the bedroom window and he wasn't, but yeah, I will never forget holding a penis that was not attached to somebody. Not having to utter the words whose penis is this. Does he have a penis and wait, don't forget his penis. The ambulance almost left with him, while we still had it in the house. A couple of years ago, I was an AEMT in a college town. My medic partner and I got called out for a 22-year-old male with suicidal ideations and possible suicide attempt that was called in by the patient's friend. I'm going to refer to H as the patient.
I feel like a penis cut off of a body would look so not like a penis that is attached to a body and has blood in it and stuff. I feel like it would be really hard to tell what it was. Am I crazy? Anybody in here have like nice? Yeah, like I feel like it would look like a deflated balloon kind of. Well, yeah, all of a penis's shape is from the blood in it. Yeah, right? Squash sausage like a sad sausage. Okay.
And friend
Simmer
despite it sounding
down,
possibly
chat.
callous just to keep things straight for the
All
story.
right, what do we think?
We get there and the friend greets us outside distressed with a black eye that was caused by the patient. Police got there too around then I believe.
That
The
looks
friend
like a
wasn't distressed
dragon's
about the
egg,
black
hey?
eye, but he was scared for his friend. Refused to press charges
The
when the police
snowman's
asked. He
cut
said his
penis
friend
is
told him he was
not-
going to kill himself and locked himself in
Nice.
his room. We were informed the patient had a variety of mental illnesses including depression. Inside the house was a mess. Obvious signs of depression. Empty beer cans everywhere.
You
and it's very
fucking
hot
got
in there.
me.
What
You
really stood
rule.
out
I love
was
that
the
that was your
fire mantle
first
filled
time
with
chat.
scientific books, full of
Welcome.
textbook and
Everybody
law.
make
Medic
the
knocks on the bedroom
snowmans
door with
feel
no answer.
welcome.
Police tries with no
That
luck.
is
At this
so
point, we assume the
funny.
worst, and the police
Holy
break down the bedroom
shit.
door.
Looks
Wakes
like a
up
weed
confused
nugget.
as to
Yeah, a
why we
little
were
bit.
barging in, but also acting very casual initially.
All right,
We
let's
asked about the suicidal ideations and possible attempt. He said he already killed himself, and it's only a matter of time.
drawstring
he said he
on
took
this
something
bad
even
boy,
the
you
CIA
think?
doesn't know about over an hour ago.
Jaime.
At this point, none of us doubt the suicidal
Monsters here.
ideations, but seriously doubt he took something so deadly that he is one
I
still
don't know if you
alive
guys
and two
can hear
completely
that.
alert and oriented with normal vitals. He's completely agreeable to transport and in fact very polite. He was also very concerned for us. He
I
said if it
tried.
got on us in any way, even from his vomit or blood, we would die, and that's the last thing he wanted to happen. We genuinely appreciate his
Such a good
concern
boy.
and the
He's
fact that
such
he's
a good
completely
boy.
agreeable. My partner and police check out his house for any substances just in case while I walk him to
Just
the
a little
ambulance.
baby.
He denies any pain
You're
or
just a
symptoms,
little
but still says he's going to be dead soon anyway, so it doesn't matter.
You're just a
He's slightly
little
sweaty, but like I said, the
baby.
house was very
I love
hot
him.
and he was in bed under a blanket. Medic rides in the back. 15-minute transport. Vitals still perfect. Still alert and oriented. PT asks about his vitals. Medic tells him perfect and we're pulling into the hospital. Patient.
He wants
Starts
to
to
leave
do a
because
weird
I
breathing
keep
thing
fucking
that I
with
can't
him.
describe
I feel
on
bad.
here.
A
Medic
Yankee
asks if he's
Doodle
alright
into
and if he would like a
London.
blanket. Patient responds in
bye.
full sentence that
Can't
summed up
help
said
it. I
yes.
just love him.
Medic and I think he's faking for attention now because we just got to the hospital and opened the doors to the ambulance. Drop him off. 2 days
He
later,
looks so
Medic gets a
freaking
call
soft.
from
He
a
is
medical
really
examiner
soft.
asking about our
He's
patient
very
and what was
soft.
on scene. Examiner was very curious about the
He
scene.
gets mats like
Medic
a
asks why.
motherfucker. It
Apparently
sucks.
his death resembled that of cyanide poisoning. Needless to say, we were in disbelief.
Alright.
Turns out he had taken sodium
Still
in his
haven't
eye.
gotten
It
a
attacks the
razor
brainstem
blade in
and breathing
here.
is the first to go. And the
Or
patient
even
was
a
right.
scissors.
If we touched it or any of his bodily fluids aside from sweat, we would have died. No cure. Minute amounts are deadly. I will never forget how nice and caring a guy he was, and how he just wanted us to be safe, and for only him to be affected. Before the medic rode in the back with him, I asked him why he wanted to hurt himself. He said because a guy online told him to kill himself, and he takes things like that seriously. That was the only reason, he said. Now obviously he had other medical issues to lead to this, and he wasn't taking his medications. But the fact that that was the final straw, just no words. Since then, I have taken every psych patient more seriously and do my best not to dismiss them if they say something, no matter if I have doubts about what they're saying. Additionally, I don't put up with bullying anymore on online gaming. You just don't know what's going on in a person's life, and how would you, a stranger, can't say to affect them. That's the call I'll never forget. My friend is a first responder. He once got a call about a man that had fallen in the shower. He gets there and the guy is over 400 pounds and out cold on the bathroom floor. My friend, his partner and the guy's roommate try everything they can think of to get the guy on the stretcher, but the bathroom is tiny and they can't even roll him over. Eventually they call 2 more ambulances and finally get the guy out of the bathroom. They get to the elevator and it's too small to fit the guy on the stretcher. So 6 paramedics have to carry the guy down 5 flights of stairs. My friend called in sick for the rest of the week cause he was so sore and stiff he couldn't move. Got a call for a suicidal male. Went to the house and we could see
Just
through the glass
realized
someone
I
holding a
said
big
I would,
knife, but it looked to be a female. It was some type of stained glass
Do the
stuff. So
drawstring
we asked
next,
what's
but I
going
guess
on and if
we're
Brian
weaving in
names
the
had been
ends.
changed, was home. She yelled Brian isn't here
That
anymore.
bag looks
Which you
amazing, by the
know
way.
isn't
Thank you
great to
so
hear from
much.
someone holding a knife. So we make entry into the house and after much confusion, figure out that the lady we saw through the window was actually Brian and was transitioning, or had transitioned, to Brianna. She was in her 50s and had been struggling for a long time because she'd worked at a place with the same coworkers for 20 years and after starting her transition, she was made fun of and left out of conversations. Her family wasn't supportive and apparently when she went online to seek help from groups, she was too old and wasn't accepted by them either. So she wanted to kill herself because of how alone she felt. I was able to chat with her for a while and convinced her to go to the hospital with me. She was going to go regardless, but there's less stress danger for everyone if they come voluntarily. When we arrived at the hospital, she said she was too scared to get out of the car. My shift had ended like 30 minutes earlier. I asked her if holding my hand would help. She said yes. So I get out of the car and hold her hand walking into the
Really
hospital.
quickly, I'm
I'm
going to
5'6",
pause
and
it.
she's at
This person is looking for ass pats. I believe that they deserve ass pats if this story is true. But still, like this is looking for ass pats right now. This woman was very scared. My shift was already over, so it wasn't my problem anymore, but I volunteered to stay with her anyway. Like, tell me I'm a good guy for that. I feel actually more like it's not like he doesn't really deserve ass pats. It's like that what human wouldn't do what they could to save that person. Anyway.
at least 6'2",
Oh yeah, lots of
and
trans
outweighs me by
spaces
100
online are
plus
the
pounds.
worst.
So I'm holding her hand, and my hand
That
is like at eye level
sucks.
for me, lol. We go in, and I
What?
tell the nurse at the error that this is Brianna, and she's having a
In
bad
what
night,
way?
code for wanting to kill
If you
herself.
feel like
The
talking,
nurse
if you
gets her
don't
room,
feel like
which is
talking
where we
about it,
part ways.
definitely don't feel
I say something to her
obligated.
about getting help and happier days ahead, and she quietly asks for a hug before I go. I say sure, and give her a hug. Sometimes I wonder if she found a support group, and if not, if she's still around. I hope so. Was an EMT before I became a nurse. Call came in for an MVC, motor vehicle collision, with 2 trapped. On arrival, cop said 2 young women, early 20s, drinking and going too fast, and flipped their car. Driver ejected. Then, we hear passenger screaming, she's pregnant. Be careful, she's pregnant. Jaws hit the floor as the smell of alcohol on both them, and their car was overwhelming. We wanted to airlift the driver, but medic on scene said no. She had fractured literally almost
The
every
bar is
bone in her
very
body.
low these
Open,
days. You're
compound
not
fracture of
fucking
tibia fibula,
wrong.
2 bones lower leg and fractured femurs. Normal protocol didn't work because we can't pull traction on femur for the open fracture and can't mast pants because she has massive pelvic trauma fractures with obvious internal bleeding signs and symptoms. Picking up her leg was like picking up jello. Had no
It's a
substance to
lot
it.
to unpack.
Was
Yeah,
shattered beyond belief.
definitely.
We transported both of them together and not sure how we kept driver alive. She obviously lost the baby. Miscarriage started in back of ambulance.
Don't
Rushed her in
feel
for emergency
obligated
surgery.
to talk about it, but
If
if
I
you feel
remember,
like it would
she
help
broke both legs,
anybody
pelvis,
to talk
arms,
about
clavicles,
it, I
ribs, facial
certainly
breaks,
welcome
skull
it.
fractures, brain bleeds,
And I'm
spleen ruptured, bowel
curious to
damage,
hear about
lost
it
uterus and
also.
ovaries, and I don't
Admittedly,
even remember what
100%
else.
part of it
First
is
bad accident seen as
curiosity.
an EMT. We'll never forget that feeling of holding a leg with no bone left to hold it together. 911
mostly if you
dispatcher
think it
here.
could help
There's many that
anybody
stick with
and
me,
you-
but the
and you wanna
absolute
talk
hardest
about
one
it,
was a mother
then
finding her child after the child
please
had committed
definitely
suicide
do.
by hanging. She was absolutely destroyed, but I could clearly hear her fighting to keep control as I walked her through getting the child down and attempting CPR. I knew that child was gone, but the mother refused to give up. I stayed with her on the phone and counted compressions with her while we waited for paid and the ambulance
Right,
to arrive.
Pancake?
Listened
Yeah,
to her alternate
it's-
between counting and begging her
I
child
think it
to
was
come
an
back.
EMT.
When the EMT showed up and took over, she finally let it go. That scream broke me, and I can still hear it to this day. Volunteer firefighter in Europe. Some summers ago we were called as first responders to a motorcycle accident.
She
When
stayed
we
with me
arrived, the
during her
cyclist
break.
was
I missed
obviously
her when
badly
her
hurt
shift
after
ended.
crashing
Yeah.
in a car. But he was
I
orientated
feel
and
like
seemed
people
okay.
that help
Ambulance
us
and
through
helicopter were on their
traumas,
way already,
like we
so we just had to stabilize
automatically
him.
build.
Not a minute
you
later he
just
started
automatically
deteriorating.
build
Another
a
minute
bond
later
with
we
somebody
started
that you go through
CPR.
a trauma
One of the
with,
arriving
right?
bystanders was a trauma surgeon and started helping immediately, shortly after the doctor on the
And it's
helicopter arrived. It was
especially like
obvious that
when
there was
they
massive
are
internal
taking a
bleeding. They
supportive
first tried to
role
relieve
for
pressure by
you,
puncturing,
like it
and then
just-
pretty soon decided that the only chance was
makes
to
some
open him
very
up. So they managed a
powerful
clamshell
friendship,
thoracotomy in the middle of the street, and
or
one started
like
to give the
really
heart
just
direct
affection
compressions.
in
The
general.
bleeding was massive, and they discovered that there was aortic rupture. The blood loss was too
chemicals
extreme,
happen,
and he died
you
there.
know?
Still to this day I have to drive slowly when I pass by that stretch of road. Memorial Day, 1989. French Frank's EMT at the time. Call dispatched as a car into a telephone pole. When we got there, I couldn't believe the carnage. A HS student had been given a muscle car as a birthday present. The police later estimated he was going over 90 miles per hour when he hit the pole head-on. Patient's right femur was about 6 inches long, his patella almost touching his pelvis. The entire long bone had compressed like an accordion. He had other multiple injuries. Took us 2 hours to cut him out of the car. The medics were pumping him so full of drugs
So
to
that's
maintain
just
his
the
blood
bag
pressure they
part,
started to
and I'm
openly
so
worry that they
psyched
might
that it
fuck his
actually
kidneys up.
looks like a
We finally got him
fucking
out of the
egg
car.
this
Only time I've
time,
ever seen a kid
and
used
not just
on
like
gurney, and took
a
off for the
frilly
hospital.
pine
Medic had 2
cone.
large bore IVs going and had a BP cuff wrapped around one of the bags to create his own rapid infuser. The kid lived. He ended up losing the foot on the leg that was destroyed, and that leg, from what I heard months later, was more metal than flesh. The irony was that the kid was a New York State indoor track and field state champion runner. Former deputy. One morning I was the early person in to take calls as the night shift was headed out and to cover what trickled in as shift change took place. It's cold and rainy and miserable all around. I'm on my way to someone's house to talk to them about a phone scam when a call comes out to another unit who just marked on duty. He lives across the county from where this call came out. A mother has called in stating her little girl got out of the house while she was getting her ready
You
for a
still
bath.
take the other
Her daughter
one,
is
too?
nonverbal and naked, and mom can't
I
find
do
her.
not like the
Everyone
other
that owned a
one.
radio in the county started to mark
The
en
other
route
one
last
bums
night's
me
shift.
out,
Port Bayless,
so-
the damn major, everyone was coming. I actually had to wait to get onto the radio to let dispatch know I was now in the area, turning onto the road. The way this road was situated was a hairpin turn off a highway that led to a dead end of the lake, with a stretch in the middle of it going up towards the houses.
Hate a
As I
hairpin
make this right
turn.
turn and am about to head up towards the residence, something catches my eye. This lit girl is standing at the edge of this lake, just staring at it. I bolt from my car, snatch her up in my coat, and start huffing it back towards the houses. Some stranger just grabbed her, and she's crying and trying to wiggle free. Mom sees me about halfway and nearly tackles me as she comes in for the biggest hug probably any of us has ever experienced. The baby was cold, but safe and unharmed. We made sure to get mom in contact with a resource that would get her little girl a tracking bracelet, and she rejoiced to learn that such a thing existed. A couple days later, the mom delivered flowers in a cart to me at the office. I still have it, years later, and it still makes me smile. Sure, there's some stories of horrible things,
Ugh.
but there's also good calls you can't forget. Although I have real mixed feelings about my time in law enforcement, I know that day I did good. I responded POF to a motorcycle crash as a volunteer EMT in a small mountain town. A lady was coming down a rocky canyon when her
Officer
husband believes
Barbarator?
she likely fell asleep, medically related drowsiness in her history. She launched Dukes of Hazzard style off the road edge about 50 feet with a 30-feet drop into a mat of bushes. Her body hit and snapped a 4 to 5 diameter fir tree. There were civilians all
What
over
does
and
that
down
even
the ditch
mean?
helping her already. Nola on scene
Oh,
yet,
okay.
volunteer FD just arriving, and air med en route too. I get down to her, and she is on a Good Samaritan's backboard. After a quick assessment and some ABC's mitigation, I decide it's best to get her to the road. We can hardly stand in the brambles and taking vitals is a nightmare. With the help of civilians and the local Type 4 Forest Service fire engine, we got her up to the road. The extent of her injuries were later relayed to us by the Air Med service. She had rapid and irregular breathing, but absent breath sounds. Both lungs were collapsed, on both sides, weak 30 radial pulses, blown pupil, broken collarbone, broken tib fib, broken lumbar, broken ribs, a lacerated liver. Her vitals were not good, and she would only make pain noises. Sometimes the words were audible about her back pain. Convening with the flight
Can you
medics, her
survive
outlook did not
having
look great, and I
two
helped load her up into the
collapsed
bird thinking she would be lucky
lungs?
if she made it to the hospital. Fast forward a year-ish later, she
Why
walked
did you
into the
restart
Forest
the chain?
Service.
Because
worked
I
it looking for me to
accidentally,
say
it was
thank you. I was in the field
curling
that
because
day,
I
so
had
I
it
was not
way
able
too
to meet with her,
tight
but
at
it was
the
a great
beginning.
reminder as to why I got my EMT in the first place. I was astonished and so
But
thankful
now
to hear of her recovery.
now it's better.
I'm a
Are
911
you going with
operator.
me right
The
now?
hardest
Because
call
this
I've
is
ever
not
gotten
something
was a
that you will
7-year-old
like
boy who drowned
literally
at the local
ever
lake beach
need.
we had in town.
I mean,
He was in the state's
I
custody,
guess if you
and his
decide that
sister
you're
had
gonna
took
do
him and his maybe
drawstrings,
5-year-old brother out for the day to spend time together. The boy was in the water, and all of a sudden the sister couldn't find him. A bystander called 911. Well, she ran into the water to find the boy.
just
I
watching
ordered a
close.
caller to get all the children out of the water and to have all the adults get in, form a line and start searching for the boy. I stayed on the line until the fire department got there, and they found the boy about 10 minutes later, so about 15 to 20 minutes after the initial call. They were able to get a pulse when in the ambulance and drove to the hospital. He was later pronounced dead that night, and the hospital called us to let us know, which usually never happens. I was 19 years old, and I had a 7-year-old brother. I held it together, but as soon as I got into my car after my shift, I cried so hard. All I could imagine was that it could have been my brother, and I never get emotional on my calls. I'm able to keep calm BC, it's not my emergency, but this one hit me right in the stomach. I'm lucky to have had such a good partner to help me through it, because I would have struggled doing that alone. I will never ever forget that day. I remember everything that happened like it was yesterday, and it's been 2.5 years. Policemen, women of Reddit, what is the most horrifying situation you've been called to? Got a call for a
I wanna
missing
start
child,
holding
got to the home to
yarn
find the mother
like
highly
you. I
distressed
think it
and
will
not
help
sure what to
me
do.
with my
I called an
consistency.
everyone
I
to first
recommend
search the home
watching
and property.
YouTube videos
I decided
of
to search the
old
backyard since it was a
ladies.
large wooded lot
I'm
with no
not
visible
kidding.
fence. After
Nobody
about
has
10 minutes
better
I found the
form
boy. He was
than an
caught on an
old
old chain
lady
link
on
fence in the
YouTube.
woods that was blocked by a bunch of trees, so you couldn't see it from the house.
I think you
He
can
had
survive a
basically
double
gotten
collapsed
strangled to
lung,
death
but you
on the
need
fence. He
immediate
must have
medical
been
attention
climbing
and a
on
lot
it,
of
fell,
luck. That's
and got
so
his hooded sweatshirt
fucking
caught on it.
shitty.
The worst part
That's
for me
so
was having to
fucking
call it in on
shitty.
the radio, knowing
Sounds
the mother might hear it
miserable.
inside from one of the other officers' radio. Not police myself, but the driver for our company used to be a local police sergeant. He was driving me to the airport and started telling me about a suicide he had to attend. He used to do this on the early morning drives when you couldn't escape. It was a local farmer, and the guy had shot himself in the head with a shotgun. This in itself didn't get to him. He had seen lots of death and suicide and was able to detach, but as he was examining the scene, he noticed almost 2 cigarette packs worth of butts on the ground beside where the guy was. He started to think about the man sitting there in the shed for hours with a gun, smoking and thinking about killing himself, and couldn't get the image out of his head. He became fixated on those final moments and how low the guy must have felt, and ended up thinking about it all the time. He eventually had to go to counseling because he was randomly crying and started to get really deepest. Not a cop, but a former medic. We responded to a car wreck in which
Old
an
ladies
SUV
are
had run off the
OP.
road and into a ditch
Straight
at high
up.
speed, causing the vehicle to flip end over end several times. There was a family of 4 in the car. The father, driver, was unbelted and was ejected through the windshield, after which the vehicle landed on him before continuing to flip, surmised this due to his location and his injuries. He was dead on the scene when we arrived. The mother was in the passenger seat and she was belted, but the belt somehow malfunctioned, we think, and she was thrown forward far enough, or the windshield was pushed back far enough for her head to hit the windshield and put a hole in it. She was alive when we arrived, but barely. The vehicle was severely mangled and we were unable to extricate her quickly. We had to work a trauma code on her while she was still in the seat, intubation, IV lines, etc. By the time the rescue squad could get the vehicle access to remove her, she had been without a pulse for nearly 10 minutes. The second arriving unit continued CPR on her during transport to the ER, but she was declared dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. The back seat contained 2 children. My recollection is that there was a girl of about 12 years of age and boy who was about 8. They were both properly restrained, and other than obvious scrapes and bruises, neither appeared seriously injured. Their vitals were in good shape, and other than being in shock, they seemed to have appropriate levels of consciousness. Because of the difficulty getting into the vehicle, they were trapped, but they could see all of our efforts to resuscitate their mother. Because of her condition compared to theirs, the main effort of extrication was to get the mother out first. The children were safely removed a bit after she had been removed and transported. They were taken to the same as the mother. We transported the girl in
The
our
same
ambulance. Once back at the the 2 children were thoroughly checked by the physicians and by radiology for any internal injuries or anything we may have missed. Neither had anything significant. What stuck with me the most was what I saw and learned as we were restocking our unit to go back on the route. One of the cops had let us know that the family was from out of town, several hours away, and had been on vacation. The closest family could not get down to be with the children for at least 2 hours. Soon after learning that, I was leaving
I
the
like a
and I
really
looked into
long
the room where the
drawstring so that
children
I
had been put
can
after their trip to radiology.
draw
They were both on
so
the
that I
same
can
bed,
tie a
and the girl
fancy
had her arms
bow.
wrapped around her little brother. Both had 1,000-yard stares. I don't know if or how anyone had told them about their parents, but you could tell by the looks on their faces that they knew. I will never forget that day. I often wonder how those kids turned out and how difficult it must have been for them. Firefighter here. Working with law enforcement, we got called for a
I think I'm gonna
suicide
do like
attempt.
10 more
We have a
stitches
6'1"
on this
Russian
bad
woman
boy,
in
and then
amazing
we'll be-
shape that got hammered
we'll be
drunk
going
and
back
cut her
through
left
with
arm to
slip
shreds.
stitches.
We tried to hold her down, but she is crazy strong, super flexible. So I am holding that bleeding left arm and my fingers slide into the open cuts of her arm. I have gloves on, but Jesus, it's creepy as she twists her arms around it trying to get free. She starts screaming my victory will be glorious and cackling like some kinda satanic animal. So I'm struggling to get this arm tied down and suddenly she just stops. Looks me dead in the face and says, "Where did you get those green eyes?" At this point she is on a stretcher with 6 to 8 cops and firefighters holding her down. Some of the cops don't have gloves on, so they don't want to mess with that bloody left arm.
A little bit
She slowly
more.
overcomes my strength
10
and in
wasn't
slow motion
quite
reaches
as
for my
much as I
zipper of
was
my pants.
expecting.
I can't
I
stop her
under-
and my hands are covered in blood. She manages to unzip them, but I
undershot
now
how
have my
much that
ass
would
up
be.
against the wall of the ambulance, so she can only get the tips of her fingers in my pants as she's straining to reach inside. We finally did get her tied down, but Jesus, it's one of my most memorable calls I've ever had. Cop said the same. I've gone on stuff way worse than this, but this always sticks in my mind as my fingers twisted around inside some lady's arm.
Yeah, this is what I want.
I have
Definitely.
posted this before. I have been in law for a long time. I have dealt with some of the worst people in our society you can imagine, and I have had the pleasure of coming across some of the nicest, most giving people as well. What you are going to read below may not be the worst thing you have ever read, but for me, it is what sticks in my head the most. What gives me nightmares on a regular basis. To talk about this helps for a bit, so when I see these questions pop up, I like to share this story. A family of 5 that burned to death in their SUV. They were traveling down the interstate when a vehicle going the opposite direction crossed the median, T-boning them, which smashed them into the car that was on their right side as they were passing. This caused their vehicle to engulf in flames. No way out except the back hatch, as their left doors were crushed from the guy who crossed the median and their right side crushed from the car they were trying to pass. Driver, dad, died on impact. Mom died from smoke inhalation. Would most have likely lived had she been able to get out. Oldest daughter and youngest daughter were found in the hatch area of the SUV, with the oldest daughter's hand on the release. Both daughters died from smoke inhalation. Mom was found as if she had just aided in getting youngest daughter in the hatch area of the SUV. Son sitting up front died from smoke inhalation, but most likely would have died anyways due to blunt force trauma burns. This may not be the most screwed up thing I have had to deal with, but it is for sure the most traumatizing thing that I hopefully never have to see again.
That's so
I was
sad.
really messed up for a while after that.
Yeah.
This family
Of
was on their way
an
to the local
entire
university
family
to see
just
their son
fucking
that they hadn't seen in a
snuffed
few
out.
months. They were 2 miles from their exit. I volunteered to go with the chaplain and give the notice. This kid lost his whole family in a split second. He said that the last thing he said to his mom was, "Don't come down here, none of my friends' family visits them, and you will just embarrass me." He was devastated. After all these years I still keep in constant contact with him, and he is practically another son to our family. Folks, your life or family's life can be over in a blink of a second. No matter the fight, etc., always let them know you love them. Hug them, kiss them, embrace them. I have seen it too
I
much.
feel like
You just never
911
know when it might be the
operators
last
must
time
be
you see
like
them or they
some
see
of the
you.
best
Don't take them for
fucking
granted.
people.
Late to the party. Not me, but a friend of my parents used to be an ambulance driver. One night he gets a call for a car accident. A drunk
Ooh,
driver crashed his
dislocating
car.
your knee.
Upon
Ooh,
arrival,
no,
they start
thank
checking
you.
everyone only to find the 2 guys in the front are dead. Trying to get to the backseat, he notices one of the passengers, 2 girls, is his
Hello?
daughter, who is also dead. He took some time off, went back to work a couple of months later, but couldn't bring himself to drive an ambulance anymore. So he works in the ER for a couple of years. He loved driving the ambulance, so after 4 or 5 years, he requests to be one again. Second day on the job, they get a call for a car crash, so he drives over there and immediately recognizes his own son's car, who smashed the front into a tree. Kid was dead on impact. When he saw what was left of his son, the guy broke down completely. Shortly after this, he was put in a mental hospital by his wife and remaining daughter, and has been there ever since. TLDR. Friend of my parents was first responder in both the fatal car crashes of 2 of his 3 kids and
That's
never mentally recovered from it.
That's just nuts,
UK
dude.
got a
Like,
call to say that a guy had been arrested in the early hours for going equipped for theft, and
That's
his
some
mother had been into the
biblical
station
bullshit
to ask about
right
the kids.
there.
What kids? He didn't mention kids. I go to the house and shout through the letterbox. No reply. Shout again and there's a 3-year-old kid comes to the door. He doesn't have a key, and I ask if he is alone. No, his 18-month-old brother is in there with him. 3 and 18-month-old kids, alone in a house, virtually all night. We use the big red magic key to break the door down and get inside. Oh my God. I'm still haunted by the squalor these kids lived in. Dirty nappies, diapers, everywhere, takeaway cartons, dirty clothes just everywhere. 18-month-old has filled his nappy, that much it's coming up his back. We get grandmother to come and collect them. As we do, I'm looking for a cup to get them a drink and bread for toast, as they've not eaten. No cups without mold growing, and nothing except tinned beans. I couldn't even get them a drink of water without risking their health. We got a bottle of water from a nearby shop. We got the kids away and do a sweep of the house. Those poor kids. They shared a single bed. The bathroom
A
hadn't been cleaned in
3-month-old
years.
shouldn't
Go
drink
to dad's
water.
bedroom.
I don't
Cannabis grow
think
set
that
up
an
in a small tent.
18-month-old.
This could have set on fire
No,
at any point, and those
18-month-olds
kids
can
would
have
have perished.
can totally
We get all
have
of that
water.
cleared up and
You're
bagged
right.
up as evidence. I go
don't know
through
why
the
I
house
said you're
switching off
right.
electric appliances and get to his computer, which is running.
Hey,
I
Sharkstar,
move the
how are
mouse to
ya?
shut down, and his desktop is a picture of young,
Been
12 to 13 years
hanging
old,
in
girl,
there.
naked. I've never been so disgusted
Doing
and angry at
my
one man and the
best,
way he
man.
could live, the way he could live like that, let alone make his kids live in that environment.
How have you been?
Second-hand account, but worth telling. I was in 11th grade and a local lady came to talk to our school about the dangers of drunk driving. To us kids who thought we already knew how bad drunk driving was, it sounded like this was a waste of time. The woman told us that her daughter had a flat tire and was calling her dad for help while pulled over on the side of the road. While talking to her dad, the phone suddenly went silent. A drunk driver had swerved his 18-wheeler off the road and hit her. The worst part, he hit her so hard that her head was found more than 200 yards away from her body. I sobbed like a baby. The assembly ended and we went to our next class, but I just couldn't stop crying. I left the room and walked back to the assembly hall, where I found the woman sitting in the dimly lit auditorium, packing away her stuff. I walked up to her, hugged her, and sobbed for a good 10 minutes. She cried, I cried, we just sat there crying. She told me that, if only one person was convinced not to ever drive drunk, that speaking about her experience was worth it. From that day on, she came to every home football game I played for the rest of my high school experience. She wore my number, sat with my parents, and cheered us on. Win or lose, she always gave me a big hug at the end of each game. To this day, I never have, and never will, drive after drinking. My dad and one of his best friends were volunteer firefighters in the 90s. My dad still is, 40 plus years
I
active
think
at the age of
anything
63.
can
His
have
station got a
water.
run called in for a bad
It just
accident.
provides
A
no
semi-truck
nutritional
fully loaded
value.
with
No,
sugar beets
babies
had
are
run a
not-
red light
like,
and
brand new
absolutely
babies are
destroyed the Geo
not
Metro
supposed to
that had
have
entered the
water
intersection.
at
At this
all.
point in time, the way the call procedure was set up was that there was a
They need to
designated
have
group of guys who would go to the
calories in
station to get the
everything.
actual fire trucks, and the other guys would carry their turnout gear in their own vehicles and go straight to the scene. The intersection this accident occurred at happened to be the closest major intersection to both my house, as well as my dad's friend's house, so they were the first two guys on scene. Turned out that the woman who was driving the
finally figured out
car
how to
that got
save my
hit was my
streams on
dad's
Twitch. It
friend's
took a
mother.
very long
He
time
arrived
to
and
find the
found his
button
own
for it.
mom
Oh,
decapitated
no.
in what was left of her car.
Well,
He
I'm
called
glad
the
that you
fire
got it figured
department shortly
out.
after that, and policy about going to the station
Don't
first was
hesitate to
revised as
ask
well.
questions in here.
Started as a ride along
If you're
during the
having trouble
academy,
with anything
summer of
else,
2006.
we're
Had to
all
complete a
super
couple hundred
happy
hours.
to
The academy was through
help you
college,
out.
so they had slightly different requirements, but still got post-certified. Showed up to do the RAL, and was immediately smiled at by the officer I rode with. Not a good sign. Come on man. Let's go. This takes place in a small town in the Potato State. Usually really quiet with the weekly drunk calls and some drugs too. This was different. WE showed up to the already cordoned off house and walked in. There was blood everywhere. Central Standard Time CSI, had already been there and collected the stuff they needed to, so we didn't really have to be careful where we stepped, other than to preserve our own clothing shoes. We walked around the house, and it was like someone had taken a paint roller with red paint and hit it with an air compressor. Red spatter in every room, but the kitchen and dining room. The stench hadn't set in, yet because it was just a short time prior, I later learned. We eventually made our
I
way
feel
to the
like that much
basement where
blood
the
would
worst scene
still
took place.
smell. I
It
feel
truly
like you
looked
would
like
still
tomato
be
soup
able to
with rice
smell
and puddles
the
on the
blood,
floor
and
and
it would
spatter on
not
the wall.
be
What
nice.
happened? Husband found out the wife had been cheating on him, so he went to his buddy's house and asked to borrow his shotgun. He waited, had breakfast at a local restaurant, then went back home. He knocked on the door and the wife answered. He shot his wife, point blank in the chest. Well, Quentin Tarantino, SP, has it wrong with all the gore, it's still fairly close when it's point blank. He proceeded up the hallway and killed his kids in their rooms. The
No,
cheater
this is
confronted him in the
actually a
hallway, and
fucking
he hit him point
spider
blank too.
bite.
He then went to the basement, turned on the radio and shot himself in the head.
I have another one
I
over
specifically
here that's
mentioned turned on the
mostly
radio
healed.
because it was on softly as we entered the basement. I guess no reason to turn
It
it
hurt
off so
really
the Central
bad.
Standard
It
Time
sucked
didn't.
a lot.
I can't hear if you're going through help by Rodney Atkins without memories coming back. TLDR first murder suicide scene, won't eat tomato soup or listen to country ever again. Scariest day call I've ever had was a medical call involving a 3-year-old girl. My first department I worked for required all officers be first responder CERTIFIED basic medical training.
Nice,
Not
Matt.
enough to be an
Have a
EMT
good
or
one.
medic, but above first aid.
Thanks for
We
coming
would
and hanging
normally
out.
respond to medical calls until the
So
EMTs
superpowers
arrived, just to
incoming?
secure the scene. This
I don't
particular
know,
call
man.
came
I'm
out as a
struggling to get
3-year-old
out of
girl
bed
having a
every
seizure.
day. I
The
am not
location of the
feeling
call
very
was at a large
super.
hotel RESORT I worked at a beach. The closest vehicle
see the
access
marks,
was
so
the
shit
front
with the
entrance,
poisonous.
and
No,
I had to
just
go
a
on
big
foot
boy.
to the actual room. When I pulled up to
Just
the front
a-
dispatch
just a
upgraded the call and informed
big
the girl
ol'
had just
guy.
gone into cardiac arrest. I started running to the room, which was nowhere near the front of the hotel, and after finding it, the family was in complete hysterics. I saw the little girl on the ground in the kitchen, who was still seizing, however could see she was turning blue in the face. The mom grabbed me and started screaming to save her daughter. I hadn't performed CPR since the academy. I told the mom
think I
and
did a
everyone to
full
go out into the
crochet
hallway
back
and for
here.
someone to run to the front to guide the EMTs when they arrived.
definitely
Suddenly,
did. I need
it was
to go
now
back.
just me and the girl in the
Yeah.
room. The gravity of the situation suddenly hit me. There was no way EMS would get there in time to help her. I paused for about 10 seconds and just tried to collect myself or froze up. It's
We
cliche,
get
but
brown
those 10
recluse down
seconds
here.
felt
They're
like an
nasty.
absolute eternity.
I had a
Somehow,
bunch of
I
them
snapped out
living
of it
in
and
my
began
shed
CPR.
back in
Amazingly,
Iowa.
with the first compression, she suddenly
a
let out a
few
giant
years ago,
cough and
like,
started
way
breathing
more
again.
than a decade
I've been a
ago.
police officer for 5 years now, responded to countless fatal wrecks,
The-
shootings,
the
stabbings,
house
murder
that
scenes,
I
etc.
lived in
But
with
nothing
my
was as scary
mom
as sitting there on the floor next to
a
that girl
long time
knowing if I
ago.
didn't do something she was going to
After
die.
she died, my sister lived
Ops
in that
gets
house
called to check
for
up on a
long
guy who
time.
hasn't shown up to work in a few days,
And
and his family haven't heard from him
She
either.
let
They show up
the
to his
shed
apartment
go.
and stumble
Like,
across him. He
she
shot
never
himself
went
in the
into the
face,
shed or
blood
anything,
everywhere,
and the
alcohol
brown
bottles
recluse
everywhere.
took
The gunshot or
her.
impact or something had even blown his eyes out. Horrible mess. Apparently he had gotten real drunk, and probably some other things, and decided to kill
We're about
himself. Boss
halfway
calls it in, and him a few
through
others who were called in are waiting for the coroner, or whoever is supposed to come, and all that cop
this
stuff.
drawstring
They're
bag.
waiting
I
in the
did
doorway
not
to his
expect
bedroom just kind of shooting
this
the
bag
shit.
to
His
take
words
the
not
rest
mine,
of the
and all
fucking
of a sudden this
stream,
dead
hey?
guy just sits up in bed and starts attempting to
I
talk.
am a
This guy who looked
slow
dead, hole in his
crocheter,
fucking
it turns
face,
out.
eyes gone, blood everywhere,
I've
sits up
known
and
that
starts
for a long
mumbling.
time. I am
My
slow.
boss, who had done tactical
But
training with the FBI, said he scared him
I
so
like
much
it
he
to look
almost drew his
nice,
gun and shot the guy.
and
Thinking he was a
I
zombie or
like to
something.
take my time.
Turns out he hadn't shot himself in a vital way,
so that
like
I
some
know
Fight
that it
Club
looks
stuff or
nice.
something. My boss wasn't very specific on that. He had drank so much and was
Need to hire
probably
a
so doped up from
bodyguard
script
soon.
pills that he had
My
no
cat
idea
is
what
getting
happened.
too famous
Mind you, he
because
had
of
only
the
shot
book,
himself the
really.
night prior. He hadn't been laying in bed for a few days bleeding out. I can only
Cute.
imagine what would race through my head if a guy who looked dead in every sense
I
of the
do
word
love
just
that
stood
you
up while
wrote
I
a
was
book
off guard
about
and
your
started
cat.
groaning
I think
and
that
mumbling.
is just the
Scary stuff.
sweetest.
I responded to a single vehicle crash where the guy was in the middle of the street. When I get there, still thinking this guy was needing help, he starts yelling gibberish and grabs his 2 kids, 1 and 3. He then starts yelling at me and reaching into the car like he is going for a weapon. I drew and sighted up on him, and he intentionally moved his kids into my line of fire. I couldn't just holster because he was reaching in the center console like he had a gun. I couldn't shoot or use Octaser because the kids were right there. I had a split second to process this information and make a decision. I decided to sight onto his pelvic girdle, which is not a horrible shot placement. When my backup got there a few seconds later, I decided the kid's safety had priority over the unknown weapon, so I rushed him in the car. Short struggle and got both girls, who were thankfully completely unharmed. He did have a weapon in the car, and I'm pretty sure he was looking for it to be in the center console he was reaching in. Thankfully it was elsewhere. It was so intense because I had such a short time to figure out what to do. I'm glad I made a good decision, and the girls and I went home safe. Ops of Reddit, what has so far been the creepiest call you've ever had to respond to, and what
I'm
happened?
excited
From my
for
post
these
8 months ago,
ones.
got a call for a missing
Ooh.
child, got to the home to find the mother highly distressed and not sure
Adding a
what to
cat
do.
camper,
I
assume you
called in
should
everyone
if
to
he
first
sits still
search the
long
home
enough.
and property. I decided to search the backyard since it was a large wooded lot with no visible fence. After about 10 minutes I found a boy. He was caught on an old chain link fence in the woods that was blocked by a bunch of trees, so you couldn't see it from the house. He had basically gotten strangled to death on the fence. He must have been climbing on it, fell, and got his hooded sweatshirt caught on it. The worst part for me was having to call it in on the radio, knowing the mother might hear it inside from one of the other officers' radio. Working third shift on Halloween night, I'm out by one of our smaller lakes just outside the city limits. Kids love to go out and
That's
drink,
why they
which is
have
surrounded by
codes.
some very nice houses. Going through the neighborhood, each of the roads ends at a small 2-lane road
That's like
that surrounds
exactly
the lake.
why they
I'm
have
slowing to the stop
codes.
sign and already starting to look to my right to make the turn. When my headlights start tracing the rock wall that surrounds the lake, I catch something out of the corner of my eye in one of the large trees
Of
that blocks
course
the
you
walk
can,
path.
yeah,
I
of
back up to
course
see what it
post a
was,
link.
and I see a guy hanging.
100%.
At first I thought it was a Halloween decoration. The neighborhood is really into decorating for every holiday, so I stop, get out, and as soon as my flashlight hits him I realize, nope, no decoration, he dead. As I'm standing there getting ready to call it in, I notice a gaggle of kids coming down the street trick-or-treating. Shit, as soon as they see my car they start heading my way faster, so I book it back up the block to meet the parent walking with them and tell her she needs to take the long way around the block the other way. She can see it on my face, I'm not kidding. Turns out he was a 20-year-old that was devastated about his girlfriend breaking up with him, and she lived in the last house on that block where she would see him the next morning when she looked out her window. We responded to a burglary alarm at a mortuary and found that one of the rear doors was left open. Policy now dictates that the entire building needs to be cleared, searched, to confirm that it was a false alarm, which most are. It's the middle of the night and totally dark. We use flashlights and never turn on lights. We walk into one of the rooms and see a body on a table. It appeared that it was waiting to be processed, possibly embalmed by the mortician. It smelled like a mildly decomposing body. Suddenly I see a shadow to my right, and I shine my light there and find nothing out of the ordinary. I immediately smell a really strong whiff of perfume blow by me. The search was completed more expeditiously than normal. After that, nothing was found. I responded to a report of an unresponsive infant. When I arrived, all the family members were standing around casually in the front yard pointing into the house. I found a baby in the back room laying on her back on a bare mattress. I started CPR, but realized the baby was probably already deceased. We rushed her out to the arriving ambulance hoping they had a way to bring her back. I learned she was the mother's second suspicious ID's death, and I had her other children removed from her care. The difficult part was when I left the scene and went to the to see what came of the situation. As I walked in and asked where she was, an nurse walked over to me and handed me the deceased baby swaddled in a blanket and told me to wait for someone to show me to the morgue. So I'm standing there in the in uniform holding what everyone thinks is a live infant, but rather, an infant corpse, and several people stop by wanting to see her and commenting on how cute it is to see an officer holding a baby. I just smiled, but it killed me inside. I was ushered back to the morgue. After what felt like an eternity and told I had to wait with the baby until the medical examiner arrived.
I don't know
They
how
took the
much I
blankets off
believe
and laid her
this.
on a stainless steel gurney and left me alone with her again. I lounged around the morgue for about an hour waiting. By the time I got home several hours after the end of my shift, because this call came out 15 minutes before the end of my 10-hour shift, I laid down on my bed and cried for a long time. My young daughter was in daycare and my wife at work. I really needed to hold both of them, so the house felt incredibly empty. My daughter was only slightly older than the infant, and when I was looking at her earlier, I kept seeing my own daughter. I didn't get any sleep at all before going back in for the next shift later that night. Got a call that someone wasn't answering their phone or the doorbell. We got to the house and noticed that every window was blinded by either curtains or pieces of paper. We rang the doorbell and yelled through the letterbox, but there was no answer.
Feel free.
We
You
opened
can
the
share
door and got
whatever you want
inside.
as long as you
In the
don't
house it looked
spam,
like someone
Shark
just
Star.
had lunch. There was bread on the table and juice or milk in the glasses. Children's toys scattered all around. Then I saw a
And
note
it's
that gave
not
me the
against
chills.
TOS,
It was
obviously.
a suicide note. As the door was locked from the inside, the person had to be in the house. We checked room by room, and my heartbeat was at 300% when I checked the bathroom. Preparing myself for slit wrists or throats, I opened the door slowly, but there was nothing. Finally, one more room left, which was the attic. We walked slowly up a stairs and we found the resident there, hanging from a beam. I will never forget the adrenaline I had, the scene in the living room or the resident I found. Not a cop myself, but my dad is, and I asked him this one time. He told me it was when he went to this one house because a woman had called and said that men were breaking into the house. He gets there and he said it was immediately very clear that the woman was not exactly altogether mentally. He said she kept mumbling things and was very jumpy and skittish, not to mention that every single wall of her house apparently had at least 6 or 7 crosses on it, if not more. He calms her down, checks around the house for any signs of entry or just anything weird, and there's absolutely nothing that would indicate that anyone had been trying to or had been successful in breaking in. He said she followed him around the entire time and would point to things, like a doorknob or window latches, and say, "Oh, that's not where I left it, that's how they got in." He said the whole thing was fairly eerie, considering he was at this woman's house in the
That
middle
is
of the night,
scary.
surrounded by crosses and listening to her mumble on about random shit. To make her feel better, he did a sweep of the whole house to see if there was anyone else inside, which there wasn't. He said the one thing that made it creepy for him was the fact that every few minutes she'd say something like, "Oh, they're here again," or "He's right behind us, I can feel it." Ex-cop. I worked in a high-tech task force agency
Yeah, that
conducting
sounds
computer
like
forensics investigations. Lots of child
old
porn.
woman that
Lots.
is
Anyways,
starting
we were
to
doing a
suffer from
multi-agency search
dementia.
warrant sweep in large metro area in California. We serve a search warrant for distributing possessing CP at a residence in a semi-decent
Okay.
area, and the suspect fit the prototypical Hollywood child molester look. He lived with his disabled wife, no kids, and
I
she
can
had mobility
click
issues,
on it,
mostly
but I
stayed
can't
downstairs,
look at it
and had not
yet.
been
I
upstairs
can't
for
look
years.
at it
We go
until I'm
upstairs, and this guy
done.
has a legitimate
Oh,
masturbation
actually, it
station
loaded
set up
really
in one of
fast.
the
That
bedrooms
is
that had an
so
outside
good
padlock on
looking.
it. It was dark, the windows were covered,
Dude,
and he had baby dolls with their
that's
assholes
really
cut out all over the room,
nice.
and some of their
I bet
mouths
you're
cut
very
out for
happy
impromptu
with that.
baby
Did you
sex
make
doll.
that or did you
Some of the
commission
heads were
it?
removed and scattered on the floor. This guy had serious issues. UK got called to assist ambulance at an address because they were struggling with a woman hit at an apparent seizure. We got there and she's this tiny skinny little Singaporean lady who's being held down on the floor by a paramedic. She's hissing and struggling against her and repeatedly trying to bite the paramedic. Her eyes are all black and red, no white. It takes me, 200 pounds, my partner for the evening, 180 pounds, plus 3 paramedics to hold her down. All the time she's struggling and trying to bite with veins popping out of her neck. She's looking past us at the corner of the room screaming at something that isn't there, telling it not to kill her and us. Her husband, who seems weirdly unfazed by the whole thing, tells us this has been happening since she last went to Singapore and got sick after visiting a holy site. Usually her sister has to stop it by putting this powder
I
on her
don't
forehead and a
believe
cross,
this
but
even
unfortunately she's out of the
remotely
country.
anymore.
In the end she was taken to hospital for a mental health assessment by the paramedics. I often wonder what the outcome was, but have no way of finding out, unfortunately. For some reason, the suicides always hit me the hardest. I had a good friend that killed himself in high school, so suicide is a touchy thing not just for everyone, but especially for those who have personal experience with it. I've seen 3 suicides by gun, 2 hangings, and a handful that did it intentionally by using drugs of some sort or other methods. Long story short, guy shot himself in his garage with a .357 Magnum. I have a pretty strong stomach,
Damn.
thankfully because of experience, but I believe I accidentally stepped on a piece of his eye. When I cleared the call,
Like,
I went straight to the locker
no
room
pun
and cleaned the
intended,
bottom
but
of my
that
boots
sounds
for a
like
good 40 minutes.
overkill.
I repeated the cleaning process at home, too. Now sure, that's not exactly creepy, just disturbing. But here's this one. We get a call from the hotel off the interstate. Employees went to clean a room and found a note on the bathroom door, which was closed and locked. It read, "Don't come in. Call 911. So the front desk did just that. We get there and she shows us the room. We try knocking on the bathroom door. No answer. We weren't even sure if there was someone in there or not. The on-site manager told us we were allowed to force entry into the bathroom. She was concerned because none of the employees ever remember the guest checking out. My partner gets the door open and it was like something off of a horror movie. Guy was in the tub, completely naked. Knife on the floor, just next to the tub. Cuts on his wrists and the absolute worst thing was the blood inside of the tub. I've never seen so much blood in my 10+ year career. His face was pale white and it appeared as he was frowning. He didn't appear to be breathing. Call a medic, my partner says. I just look at him and say, oh no. Dude's dead. I'm not touching him, you can check if you want, but we need to get our supervisor, an EVT and detective here. I could recognize a dead guy when I saw one. I get the manager, who is having a legit panic attack, to calm down and head back down to the desk while we deal with this. Called for another car and told dispatch to contact our evidence technicians and a detective when I hear my partner scream and exclaim, oh fucky shit. I run back over there and he's wide-eyed staring at the body. He just moved. That fucker's alive, man. He moved. What are you talking about? He has a fucking pulse. It's faint as hell, but he has it. His leg moved under the water when I tried checking for it. Sure enough, I put on my big boy undies and could barely feel a pulse on this guy. Medic called and they rushed him to the ER. Turned out he did the cutting just minutes before the cleaning maid found the note, so surprisingly he barely lived. Editing for clarity, I need to remember not to post long comments while on mobile. He lived but it wasn't pretty. He cut his wrists while he was bathing. A majority of what looked like blood was indeed blood, but it was mixed in with water which made it look like there was a lot more blood than what he actually spilled. And in all honesty, cutting your wrists isn't a great way to off yourself. He thinks he was bleeding for about 10 or 15 minutes before he started to go to sleep, and he would have been fine for a little longer, as long as he got help. It depends on a lot of other circumstances. And I know, I should have been more proactive in checking for signs of life. It was irresponsible for me to not check sooner. In many instances it's fairly easy to spot a corpse when you have one, but this one really tricked us, and we learned from that. Thankfully, my partner did while I stepped out, and I was not intending to stop him from doing so. My tone was a bit more cynical. Hey, dude looks dead. I really don't think we need a medic. You can check him but I don't want to. And in our defense, he really did appear to be 100% dead. No chest movement at all, pale skin, it looked like he could have been there for at least hours. But like I said, I was wrong and I acknowledge that. Sometimes you forget that your experience and training isn't objective, and still being relatively new, then it was a learning experience for me. You can bet that from there on, we both were more cautious. Got a report of a missing husband. He told his wife and family of 6 children that he was going to get his tires changed, but never returned, and this was 12 hours ago. They had purchased another house in a neighboring community, and the relationship with the wife was under pressure, so the wife assumed he was staying at the other house and claimed he would never kill himself. The strange thing about this report, though, was that he emptied his personal bank account into his wife's this morning as well. The wife explained this off saying that they recently had a fight about finances, and he agreed that he was bad at money, and maybe they should just have a joint account that she controls. On a hunch, I asked his 14-year-old boy if there were any areas in the mountains nearby that his father enjoyed going, and the son identified a road about 10 miles away. It was nearing midnight, but I decided to drive to the top of this old and abandoned Forest Service road. As I drove through the snow and started to climb the road, I felt a gut feeling that I would 100% find this guy up there either thinking about or already acted out a suicide. The snow-laid gravel road had some sign of travel, but no real indication of how fresh the vehicle tracks could be. As I reached the top of the road after an hour of travel, I was honestly surprised that I did not find his black truck. I spent the drive back down thinking about gut feelings and how they are unreliable, but that I somehow felt different about this one. As I traveled up the road, I did notice over a dozen smaller roads branching off, but they were not mapped, and I had already spent too much time on a single occurrence in a busy city with too few police officers. Nonetheless, I decided to check a single of these secondary roads, and about 3/4 of the way down I picked a road at random to check, and sure enough my headlights lit up the back end of a black truck about 100 yards past the first corner. Even if I hadn't memorized the license plate beforehand, I wouldn't have had to run it, it was clearly his. I radioed that I had found the truck, parked my vehicle, and traveled at 20 feet to his truck with my heart beating like I was doing it at a sprint rather than a normal walk. What I found inside was a mess of brains and blood caused by a self-inflicted shotgun wound under the chin. I'll save you from the description. There was just something about that gut feeling while traveling this abandoned and quiet mountain road, followed by a sense of being tricked by the gut feeling, then finding out it was true by discovering such a gruesome scene, having to wait 3 hours next to his truck waiting for body removal, and then to end it all by having to go to the family who was expecting good news to deliver to them the worst news possible. That makes me feel creeped out to this day. This may be quite tame compared to other posts, but so far it's the creepiest for myself. An elderly woman had called in reporting that a man carrying a drawstring bag was walking around her and her husband's property. She described the man as walking like a zombie and was looking down towards the ground the entire time. She wasn't able to tell if the man was attempting to break in or not. My partner
Matt,
and I
that's
were
such a
about 15
pretty
minutes
sequence.
away
I
when a call came in
love
from dispatch.
that.
When we were about halfway there, the elderly woman had reported that her husband, who was downstairs watching the front yard with shotgun in hand by the front door, told her that he
That's
watched
so
the trespasser
nice.
disappear into a cornfield that was across the street from their house. My partner and I quickly searched the area around the cornfield, then went to the house. As I took down some information from both the husband and wife, my partner searched the property for any signs of tampering but found nothing. We then patrolled the area for a good 10 or so minutes hoping to find
You
the man
left
but didn't.
already, but that is
Man,
really
this was
nice.
probably 2010, 2011, I was really new. Call came I'm as an unknown problem.
Oh shit. Okay, sorry, that was the end of that one. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for hanging out tonight. Tomorrow we're gonna do some basic stuff. We're just gonna go back and forth doing single crochets, double crochets, and half double crochets. And we'll I'll just use this yarn, the yarn that we just used. Actually, no, we'll use up the rest of this purple yarn because there's not enough of this purple yarn, I don't think, to make another bag. I could be wrong. It does look like it might be enough to make another. I don't know. I'll find some fucking yarn that we can use. I am so pleased that you guys hung out with me. If you guys could all just freak out in chat, just put your favorite emote in chat, your favorite Twitch emote, just put it in chat. It doesn't have to be one of mine. Just your favorite emote that is on Twitch. If you could just put that in chat so that you guys are active, in chat. I'm going to go ahead and find somebody to raid. That would, it would mean so much to me if you guys would stick around for the raid. Because you guys are so sweet to me. I love you. You guys are so wonderful. Thank you so much. It would help me out a lot if we could have big fat fucking raids because we're trying to grow our channel back up. So please just hang in there with me. I promise I will find somebody very fun. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a nice night. Don't forget to bring your yarn and your hook. I love you guys. Night.